allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Any of the commissioners have any disclosures or conflicts of interest?
Mr. Chairman, I will disclose that I have a conflict with number 3, the nightly rental ordinance, to the extent that I represent a client who intends to, or has applied, I guess, for approval of a nightly rental development.
Okay, and I own nightly rentals and I also have agricultural property, so I'll make those disclosures as well. Okay, review of the minutes. I didn't see those in the packet. Are they in there and I just missed them? I'm sorry? Got my hearing aids. So I'm looking for a motion to table the review into the minutes. We don't have them in our packet.
I make a motion that we table the review of the minutes until next.
Second it.
Got a motion and a second. Take a vote.
Aye.
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 Okay. That will take us to the public forum. This is an opportunity for the public to discuss any item that is not on the agenda tonight. If you'd like to make comments, state your name and address and approach the microphone. Unless we have. Yeah. Okay.
I just see down to P,
Okay.
so I don't know
All right.
what is on the agenda.
Okay.
Do you have anything you would like to talk
Yeah,
about?
are you good? Okay.
This
I mean, not different than what you guys.
Okay. All right. Okay, I'll take a motion to close public forum.
I'll make a motion.
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion. We close public hearing.
I second it.
Take a vote.
Forum. Aye.
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 Okay, moves us to reports. I don't have anything to report. Any of the commissioners have anything to report? Planning and zoning administrator, Darren, have you got anything?
Just let you guys know, we've got a lot of developments coming on, everything from small to bigger. Things are moving along well, and appreciate all you guys for all the work you're doing as well.
Thank you.
So, and
Thanks for the work you do as well. Riker, have you got it?
I don't have anything specific to report. Anything that I'll report will be in the agenda items.
Okay. All right. I did not ask for approval of the agenda order. Does anybody see anything there? I should have asked that.
It looks good.
Can I get a motion to approve the agenda order?
I'll make a motion. We approve the agenda order as is.
Second it.
I've got a motion and a second. Take a vote.
Aye.
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 Okay, well then that will take us to business items. F1, discussion modifying Title 10, Chapter 9, agricultural acreage requirement. Staff have anything for us on that?
Yeah, so the reason this item's before you is a request has been made to reduce the minimum acreage requirement for the A agricultural zone from 1 acre to ½ acre. And then just some additional information there in research that staff has done regarding that. Most municipalities near us, near Tokerville, have more than one agricultural zone, including a residential agricultural zone. These residential agricultural zones tend to have a minimum size requirement of ½ acre. And this is here for your consideration and discussion.
Where did the request come from?
The resident.
Yeah. Any commissioners have any other questions for staff?
I wonder, I guess I wonder why. Is this beneficial to the city to do this?
I don't see how it's beneficial because you're taking away all the people's rights that are living in A1, that built in A1, and respect A1 and to sell off their backyards, they become non-conforming. I see it as a disaster for Tocqueville because we're trying to preserve in our general plan agricultural districts and areas. But if you take away A1 and everybody will do it that don't want their backyard and they'll divide it in half. And then what happens to that half acre? It becomes agricultural, but for what? They can build outbuildings on it or whatever, or grow a lawn, or come in here later and want to build a house on it. That's what's going to happen. I just don't see it. I don't see it fit in Tocqueville. It's not the dream. It's not the plan. I think it's a mistake and it shouldn't be on here because I think it's a direct conflict with the person asking. And I'm absolutely opposed to it. I want to preserve the value of Tocqueville the way we have it. I want to preserve our A1 as A1. I see no advantage in splitting an acre up. Unless we're going to move on down the line and move into building houses behind houses, because that's just what I can foresee.
So this ordinance isn't replacing A1, it's just adding an additional,
It's going to 0.5.
It would be a-
so that you can have either or. So I guess I'm curious of the mechanism. So let's say that you have a 1 acre lot and somebody wants to split that lot. They would both have to comply.
They'd have to get a
In
zone
compliance.
change.
They would have to do a residential
It
zone.
would still be the same
If you,
zoning,
yeah,
same
and I think
uses,
Riker
same purpose.
is bringing the discussion, and I don't know who the person requested or the conflict. I don't.
Well,
You must assume that I know too much.
It's a conflict. It's totally to me. What happens to the lot that's only a half acre? Now they
No.
have to be in a different
Well,
zone
no,
too.
no. Yeah, what I'm saying is the discussion is, do we want to consider creating a second agricultural zone, a rural agricultural zone, and having the size requirement smaller for that? Creating it is one thing. If someone wanted to utilize the benefit of that and they're currently zoned agricultural, they'd have to get their property rezoned, have to go through the public hearing process. And, at that point in time, frankly, zone changes are completely legislative and very discretionary at the count, from the governing body. They can deny it and it'd be very hard to challenge. But it doesn't automatically rezone people's property. I think the question is being asked from staff. Do we want to consider staggering or tiering our agricultural zone into 2 zones?
So if you're owning a piece of property and you want to split it, then you rezone
You
it.
have to rezone
And
first.
then you would
and
also
you'd
have to do
Yeah.
depending on how many,
Minor
a simple
subdivision.
subdivision, minor
minor
subdivision,
subdivision.
or a full-blown subdivision. Is this not correct?
The size of the lot does not determine your zone.
Correct.
So
Sure it
the-
does.
Well, except for
1
the
acre
fact.
lot is 1 acre.
Let me clarify that real quick. So for 1 acre lot and you wanted to subdivide it in ag area, there is only, the smallest lot is 1 acre. You can't split that unless we have a requirement for a zone for that. You could rezone to R120 and then split it into 2
See,
half-acre lots.
and Wayne, I think that
In
if
the middle of an agricultural zone surrounded by A1, you're allowed
Well,
to split your lot.
about 6 years
That's-
ago, our state legislature changed and they eliminated from the land management code the requirement that there could not be, zoning could not create a peninsula or an island. Basically, they statutorily did away with the concept of spot zoning. So technically, yes. And the question that I would have is, would you rather have someone who's wanting to sell off the back of their lot, rezone to R120 right around or go to an RA zone, like a residential agriculture zone, where they can still continue to do agricultural uses around the other agricultural uses and not go so specifically residential, which
Or have to go to
limits it.
R120. Yeah.
Yeah, then that's when
But
R120 goes.
R120 does have a lot of agricultural, it's.
There
taken
is.
a
You can do, I
permitted
just don't think you
gardens,
can have large
animals.
Can you have
have
large
to-
animals?
Yeah, you can.
With
That's-
condition.
I'd have to, yeah.
It depends
There's a point
on the
system.
size of your lot.
Okay.
So
I'll figure
have
it
you
out.
got anything, Jenny, to add to this?
Can we look at a map of what existing stuff this would affect. I looked on the general plan, but then I was looking at some other things that I think it would affect that are currently zoned
yeah.
Our
R1.
website, we have.
The general plan will never have an accurate zoning map. The
Yeah.
minute that the general plan goes into effect, the zoning map is outdated. So the city's required to have an actual updated zoning map that we update by ordinance. The general plan map is not accurate. As soon
Yeah.
as that goes into effect, as soon as the general plan goes into effect, the zoning map is outdated the first time there's a zone change.
Okay.
What she's
I just
pulling
can't
up
get the internet on my
on the
computer right
web,
now.
on the website.
So on this
Is-
map, it's the green that would be affected by what we're talking about?
You could rezone a portion to a half acre ag.
Technically, it'd be a
Okay.
you could down zone
So
back to
anywhere
an
you
ag. I guess.
Doesn't
So
have to be ag.
specifically up on Sunset, for example, this is specifically where this is coming from. Up on Sunset, they are being held to 1 acre ag land, right? There are other areas in the city where people have ag land that are less than 1 acre. So the question is being asked, why is Sunset held to 1 acre when other areas in the city, we actually have ag land that is less than half an acre, that is less than 1 acre? That's where the question started. That's how it went. There were people that obviously wanted to purchase property from their neighbor and keep that ag land and just increase the size of theirs. So the ag land was staying, right? And so that's the question, is why is Sunset, or people that are not in subdivisions why are they being held to the 1 acre? That's the discussion that you're having, of if you think that's appropriate when we do have ag land within this city that exists that is less than 1 acre.
Question for Heath
Are
on
you-
that. Heath, with stuff that's done in the past, half acre ag,
Mhm.
it doesn't fit our current ordinance now.
It's a legal non-conforming use. It's a grandfathered use.
Right, it's a grandfather. That doesn't mean that we have to allow, because we've had it in the
Yeah,
past.
it doesn't set any
So
precedent.
there's no precedent set with that.
I'm just trying to think of who would have property that's less than an acre in 1 acre zoning. It's not out there, I don't believe. Unless you're in the old part of town and it's all R112.
I have one.
You have how many acres?
It was,
How many acres you got?
I have, the property that I have one home
I was
on
trying
is
to
a
be
half
I love
that
acre
smile.
lot. But in my opinion, I'm sure that it was a non-conforming lot back then, because it was subdivided, and each piece, my one lot is 1 acre and the other one is a half acre. So I know that it does exist. I just don't know that it's something that, because it existed in the past.
So
something
is it
we have to
ag or is
adhere
it just a place to build a house?
It's really, it's zoned ag 1, so it's not conforming, because it's still called ag 1 zoning, but it's not conforming to
That
that.
came from somewhere in the 70s.
It's been a while
Yeah.
back since it happened. And so that's my point, is because it was in the past, and I don't necessarily think that we're like, discriminating. It was something done in the past. Ordinance have been, done since then. These are our ordinances today. One thing I wanted to do is I wanted to read the purpose of ag for one. And then I also, I, like Riker, had looked around at some local areas. The ag 0.5, where they're not talking about ag 0.5, they're calling it RA, I think it is. 0.5 is very similar to our R120. It has very much the same uses. It calls out you can have animals, but you have it limited, that type of thing. Another one that I did see was St. George has a 0.5 acre. St. George 0.5 acre does not allow for dwellings. It's not a permitted use. So that, to me, when I look at the intent of that, is to say, hey, you can either have a house on a half acre, or you can have ag use on a half acre, but you can't have both. So to me, that makes a lot of sense. So I think the real question is, and this is why I want to read this purpose of ag land in Tokerville. And it says the purpose of this district is to identify and preserve appropriate lands for permanent agricultural use, and such incidental uses normally and necessarily related to the primary agricultural use. The district regulations are intended to maintain the unique character of the city agriculture areas and ensure that survival of agricultural uses and attendant open spaces. So if you were to say that, I mean, if we were to adopt a 0.5 acre ag, you have many big areas that could then rezone to 0.5. And you could, if we were to allow them to have a home on that half acre, we would pretty much just we could do away with all of our ag zoning without going to rezoning to R120. That's not exactly how I wanted to say it. I'm saying that if you wanted to change all that ag zone to half acre lots, you could rezone it all to R120 and get the same thing out of it. Other than
With the conditional use permit.
with a conditional use.
Yeah,
Now,
large
permit-
animals are conditional use. I'm
And
looking at the
permitted use is
residential
large, are animals on.
household pets.
So Ag 1 still says that you have to comply to the large animal ordinance, which I think is 514 or something like that.
Doesn't require a conditional use permit.
But it's not a conditional use. But you still, if you have a 1 acre, there is still a formula that says
Yeah.
you can only have 100 points. A large animal is 25 or 50 or something like that. But so my point is to just say that, do we want to preserve our ag areas? And that's what the intent of that is. Or could we just rezone everything to half acre lots and get what the applicant is asking, or not applicant, but the request is asking?
Well, okay, so, but is the ask to rezone all of them to that, or
No.
can't?
No.
So if they were to
apply?
Just the
It would have to
possibility.
be, it would have to be applied for. We would create the zone, but there would be no property, at the time of creation, there'd be no property within the town
In the
boundaries
zone.
that would be in that zone.
Okay.
Until someone applied, went through the process and got rezoned to it.
I personally, I don't see a problem with it, with creating a half acre ag. I lived in Winchester Hills years ago. There was 5 acre, 3 acre, 1 acre, half acre lots. Everybody had horses or a cow or something. You still have to comply with the animal ordinance or the animal control ordinance. I don't see that it's a big deal personally. We say we want to be kind of a rural agriculture area still. That just, to me, that just amplifies it.
Well, that's,
I think it
I actually think
demotes
it
the ag. I
detracts
think
from
it doesn't promote agriculture anymore.
Let's say that someone's got a larger tract of land somewhere, let's say even 10 acres, and they want to create horse property and they want to subdivide it into half acre lots, just to make it beneficial or profitable to be able to do that.
You mean sell them off
Sell them off,
to build houses?
They would have to
Or-
go through the whole process, build a home on it and have a horse.
Then it makes no sense to build a home on a half acre ag lot, because you can't build a home on an ag. So now you're gonna want to move to, let's all go to half acres and go ahead and build a house.
so the
Your
purpose
density
of,
goes up, your open space is gone, and your neighbors hate it.
the
they have
purpose of
rights.
ag zoning is open spaces. That's one of the main ideas in
Hold
it.
on.
So when you,
Wayne,
I don't think we're creating open space. by
Wayne, did you say
busting
you
them
can't
down.
build a house on an agricultural lot?
Would I?
No, did you say that? I was confused. I
That's-
thought I heard you say you can't build a home on an ag
You
lot.
can't,
You
cannot
can.
build on
You
that.
can.
You
On
can. What
on a-
single
on
family?
agricultural A1, you're entitled to one home.
Yes, yeah.
But now are we entitled to a home on ag half acre?
Well,
and that would be part of the discussion.
Well,
that's,
But couldn't we
I
say,
see what you're
couldn't we say
Because it's-
that having a large animal is not, doesn't work on a half acre ag lot? Could you qualify
I'm
it?
pretty sure.
right now, we're saying that it can qualify on a half acre lot in a residential zone by a conditional use permit. So we've already, and believe me, I was here 9-10 years ago when we revised the animal control ordinance. And there was room, back when this room went all the way to the back wall, full of people who wanted to preserve the right, regardless of whether they're in a residential zone. They said, we're more agricultural. We want to be able to have small animals, large animals. And so the council really had to back off. And you see in our animal control ordinance, it allows large animals by conditional use in residential zones.
The other benefit of it is,
Most cities don't. by the way.
The other benefit is that now we keep saying we will need affordable housing, affordable property. It's going to be less expensive to buy a half acre lot than it is a full acre. And we don't have the water necessarily for pasturing a full acre. But if you're building a house on a half acre and then you're only pasturing less than a quarter.
I think that's a good point.
But are we giving up our open spaces by doing that? And that's what Ag 1 is about.
I mean, go to your current general plan, which is, only guidelines. It's clearly stating there that that's what we want. And it might be merely guidelines, but they can't change that.
It's desired. Great, beautiful
'Cause I mean,
green
it's-
belt of open
it's-
fields
I
would
want
be
you all to
desirable.
imagine West Fields and everywhere else having double the houses now in there. You got half acres behind half acres with no access, zero access to it. The person in question has access to it, but a lot of lots, you don't have access and they'll want to split that. And I don't see the meaning to split that in. There's no advantage to it because you can't get to it unless you create an illegal flag lot to go down by the side of their house to get to build another house in the back.
And
Because
eventually that will
everything's
happen.
trapped. Oh, that will happen.
Well,
And
So-
I think that's.
So tonight, I think we need to give direction on whether we think we should move forward with Ag 0.5 or
Or at least explore it.
let it stay.
Sure. I'll make a motion that we continue down this road of exploring it and see if we can come up with an ordinance. And if we can't, we can't.
Okay,
So
so
making a motion just to
Let's-
flat out deny it.
No,
Keep
hold on,
our
there's a
A1, keep our A1 intact.
This is discussion only, so.
Yeah.
So, and motion. is-
Motion, but
Yeah.
that was probably the wrong.
so
term.
this is
Yes.
this is direction.
My
to
recommendation
staff.
would be,
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't have to make a motion on anything then.
Would
So-
you want to, just for clarification for staff, if they are going to go down this road and come up with an ordinance for you, would you want to take just our current ordinance and modify literally just the part where it says 1 acre and change 1 acre?
No,
to
that's
0.5?
not. That
Are
would
you,
not
are
be
you wanting to
appropriate.
create an entirely different zone with a different ordinance? Would you like us to use this ordinance and modify it? This is what, the physical restrictions right here, currently that says 1 acre. Are you asking for us to just simply change that to 0.5?
I personally think we should stay at Ag 1 myself.
I want to keep Tocqueville like it is. I want to keep my promise to the people. I want to adhere to the general plan, even though everybody thinks it's a guideline, because that's what the mass amount of people, the majority wanted, was to keep that town this way. We have our old town. We're making a whole new development out there so we can preserve our old town. We're making a bypass road so we can preserve our old town. And I'm sitting here, my ears are hurting because you're trying to destroy this town by splitting it up.
When
That's
we
just
look
my
at
opinion.
the survey results and we look at the general plan that we've gone through, and I know, again, guideline and thing, it's definitely clear that people want those open spaces, that rural feel, all of that. When we start breaking down everything that we have to maintain that, eventually we lose all of that. So me personally, I think if you want those types of things, then you can go for a zone change to R120, which will allow you to have ag uses in those zonings because it's already in our ordinance, and even so much that it gives you the ability to own animals that most places don't. So Winchester Hills is still available on an R120 using the current animal control ordinance. So to me, I don't see the reason for to change that, and I think it would be detracting from what the citizens of Tokerville want. So.
My only concern with what you just said, Sean, is that if somebody wanted to use, buy some pieces of agriculture from their neighbors only for an agricultural use, and they came to us and said, I want to change this to R120, I think that's a bigger hurdle for them to get just agricultural use out of that space. And if it is just agricultural use that they're seeking, then we're not putting residences on this space.
Except for our agricultural now, it does allow for homes and those kind of things. And so one of the things I looked at and kind of I did try to look at and say, okay, what is the purpose of this? And we already have our R120 is a very similar to our RA 0.5 in other communities. And then I look at St. George and they say no dwellings on those properties. So to take a home that's 1 acre ag that has a home on it, and now you split it to ag 0.5, that's non-compliant with the one that has a home on it currently. So there's just a lot of things that I think are hurdles that I don't think we need to introduce. To me, like I said, if you want to do those half-acre ag lots, which I think that if we did do that, I think it would be prudent for us to say, restrictions on animals and things like that they still are applied in the R1, but as opposed to permitted and conditional and things like that. I can see where, I can just see it creating a lot of issues and also taking away from what Tokerville is today, which is open spaces, fields, that kind of thing. If you want what you can get on R.5, go to take an ag to R120 and you can do that.
So, yeah, I was just going to add to that and just the clarification on that. So keeping in mind that keeping ag land is the goal, and keeping in mind what Wayne is saying about, okay, this could potentially make us just have a bunch of houses in Westfield that we currently don't have, or really anywhere, right? And keeping that in mind, if you're going to force a zone change to an R120, you've lost the ag land anyway. You've lost it anyway. If I have a house and my neighbor has an acre and they want to split that, right, into half-acre ag, the front's half acre is ag, the last half of it's going to be ag, both of those stay in the current zone. They stay ag. We don't lose ag. If you force them into a zone change because they want to have horses on the front and they want to sell it to their buddy moving to town and their buddy wants a horse, and you make them rezone to residential, we've just lost an acre of ag.
And
So
with
I guess
ag,
that's if you can,
that's 50-50 because you would have lost it if you went ag 0.5 anyway.
Not necessarily.
So, yeah.
So let's say you go to
can still
ag
go ag on
0.5.
no,
Ben?
from a water district standpoint of agricultural, from all sorts of things, agricultural, staying agricultural, keeping agricultural zoning is a value in itself. Especially as we enter this drought situation where they're pushing us to have a 0.59 standard, which you're going to see in the next ordinance. We're being pushed and pushed and pushed to turn things to residential so that we can start restricting the amount of water being used on lots. If you keep the zoning as agricultural, there's a huge value to that. From a water, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, but I'm just saying, if you're going to push them to a zone change to residential, you're going to lose ag land anyway. If you allow them to have half-acre ag and half-acre ag, and if they have horses on it or they have this and that they could do in a residential anyway, for me, I would think that it would make more sense to leave it agricultural zoning. So at least you preserve the zoning. If the uses are going to be the same, I would think it would make more sense to preserve the agricultural zoning over residential. That's just my opinion.
We don't want to get rid of the ag,
Right. But
and we
they
don't want
could,
residential, but what's going to happen is it's going to become residential.
Not
It'll come
necessarily
before.
residential, because if you force somebody to go to R120, then they have to build a house before
wanna
they
go
can
to
do anything
R120.
else with it.
I don't want to go to R120. I want to leave everything ag, just ag. I don't
But-
want to go to
one.
But if somebody that has Ag 1, they can change the zoning to R120 and split that lot just as easily.
They could do that. Even
That's gonna
now.
happen in
They
the
could
middle
do
of the
that
agricultural
today.
zone.
And that will
So
happen.
that doesn't, so us changing to R.5 or R1 does not affect that. Because
Now,
that could happen
however-
at any time.
However, if you change to R120, now they've got to build a house before they can do anything else with the lot. If you leave it ag, they could build a barn on there and have their animals on it and not have to
Or if
build
we
a
were to
house.
say
And
on
now
an
you've got-
ag 0.5, you cannot have a dwelling. You could build your barn without having a home on it because that's too, the way I believe that St. George looked at it was overuse of that land. To put a home on it and also have animals on there was, that's, my interpretation. I don't know if that's why, but.
What would happen to the homeowner that he had that happened to them. And then let's just take Sunset area. You know, there's not many animals out in the main street going up Sunset, but then all of a sudden these people have horses right next to them, and start complaining about the flies and everything else because it's ag, but they used to have some more space. You trade away your space, you never get it back.
Wayne, would you be supportive? I'm just trying to think outside the box on this. Would you be supportive of the creation of an ag 0.5 zone with no single family dwelling as a permitted use on it?
Well, I think that's going down the better track
Yeah.
because it's staying ag and it's going to be an ag use.
Yeah.
I mean, the neighbor might not like it all of a sudden becoming an ag use, but it's still, when you look down on Tocqueville City, you still see open space ag. Not, I mean, you see a barn, but a barn is for animals, and so that's I'm not
Darren
opposed to
has a
that. No,
comment. Let me,
not opposed to that. No.
I just want to remind you too that, you know, there's a lot of different things about this because you start talking about flag lots. There's a lot of things because if you just have 1 acre, you start out with 1 acre of ag and you try to do a flag lot on it, you could not physically do it because in our flag lot ordinance that you cannot count the pole portion of that. That's the back part. But
Yeah,
what
back.
I guess is what I'm saying is the
flag the
back
staff.
back portion.
Full of flag has to.
Flag. You're not.
But the way that you would, I mean, if you had a rectangular 1 acre parcel, you could cut it in such a way that makes the back smaller in depth. But because it owned all of the pole, you could go half and half.
Just barely.
They would just be different dimensions of.
And then if you had multiples though, you've still got the subdivision ordinance that's going to come in to play. Like if we could discussion, there's minimum frontage. There's going to be road dedications. You know, we try to avoid flag lots as much as possible. I don't know that's a hardened fact, but
so do we let it die now, or do we want to give recommendations to staff to notice up something?
I think give
I
recommendations
wanna
to
let it die.
staff. Look at, and maybe just prohibit building on it, building a residential home on it.
Okay, staff, when you make that comment, let's work on that. So
We as a
half
planning
acre-
commission only recommend.
Yeah.
So
He's looking for direction.
guy that wants
You
to
guys-
go
You guys are policy
is going to
recommenders.
go, no, he's going to go right to city council, and city council has the authority to change it, do
He's-
whatever they want with it.
No,
So whatever we say.
this is starting at the planning commission. So this does not
We
go to,
start
this
here,
does not
yes.
go to council unless it receives a positive recommendation to council.
I understand that.
Yeah,
totally,
if
I
you,
understand that
if you, if
But
you
I'm-
were
I'm
to
so-
recommend
my mind is
denial.
so beat up with general plan is only a general guideline.
If you were-
And
yeah.
I'm going to tell it straight out. They live by that gospel, and it's not fair to the public. That's all I'll say.
I agree. I
I'm
do agree
done.
with that. So Wayne, this is what I think is, he's going to take that and look at, if he's going to explore ways to look at 0.5 ag. If it's something that we don't agree to, he's going to come to us and, hey, these are my ideas. We then, once we have an ordinance that we think it would work, then we would recommend it to council. If there's nothing we can work out, then we just don't recommend anything and we leave it.
It
So
just dies.
right now, we're just exploring that.
Riker,
Yes.
look at-
I'm with you. I
look at
do
St. George
agree
City. I
in
think
ag
Ivans
one, and we
also
shouldn't
has-
change it.
Ivans also has a 0.5 RA zone. Look at those and maybe give these guys a draft to look at and see how it feels. And it sounds to me like they don't want to see single family dwelling as a permitted
Yeah,
use in
exactly,
that RA5.
Any other uses that you would, Daisy, will you scroll to the uses? Are there any others that you would like us to exclude
You know,
right off the bat?
I think a good spot to look for me would be going to St. George's 0.5. They talk about accessory buildings for ag and things like that that kind of keep and maintain that same feel.
Yeah. Barns, tax sheds.
Barns, tax sheds, things that apply to agricultural that would be allowed in that ag zone now can be allowed. So
I'd really like to see Tocqueville come up with their own stuff. We borrow all the stuff from everybody and we have this problem. We're not Leeds, we're not St. George, we're not anybody. We're Tokerville. We need to create our own, maybe with some guidelines, but we need to create our own.
The intent of where we use as a baseline, other cities do the same too. They call us for our ordinances. They'll say, hey, what are you guys doing with your livestock? And they do that. And the point is that usually by the time it's become an ordinance, it's gone through multiple rounds of, in other cities, it's gone through multiple rounds of public hearings. So it's been through their planning commissions, it's been through their city councils, it's been through their legal teams. So it actually saves us a ton of time and a ton of money. And you guys are still able to make whatever changes you would like to have.
Or nothing. We could say it
Right. Or
doesn't
you can
have
say
to
we don't
be.
want any of this, but it gives us a very good starting point for things that have already cleared planning commissions, council. And we try to only choose from cities that have a vision that we like or that we would like to emulate. Ivans is known for being, we're known for being very, very restrictive on building. Obviously, they now have approved some very large development, which is not our vision. But for something like this, where they're preserving that, I would say that Ivans is probably a good place to look. City of St. George, they've got all of that out through Little Valley that they've done by Horseman's Park, that they've done a good job. Meadow Valley Farms, they've
Also down there in
preserved.
Bloomington Fields, like if you look
ranches.
along some of those, roads that have nice homes, but there's the river meanderland back there.
Tin
They have
ranches.
a residential lot, and then they own a second lot back there behind that is zoned this RA5, and they have their horses and stuff like
So
that.
let me just, so that I can clarify in my mind, if we were to say RA as opposed to A.5, then they would have to rezone to RA.
Well, yeah, we probably can't use the term
So-
Riker residential agricultural zone. It just needs to be an agricultural.
Unless we want to create that
Or like an
zone.
A-20 zone.
Yeah.
If we're not allowing, because we don't want to give the RA would give you the connotation that a
That you
single
have-
family dwelling would be
Right.
permitted.
One thing I would like to remove on this is the conditional use of kennels.
Okay.
Half
Yeah.
acre for
Of
kennel
what?
is just,
That's way too small.
Will you
Oh,
scroll?
kennels.
commercial
Yeah.
kennels,
So and
even
those
as a-
those are certainly the things that I would.
I would
Commercial
pull off.
livestock operations too.
I would eliminate those condition uses.
Probably some of those public, what about the public utilities? The uses
No,
that would go up.
No,
What
we
about-
want to be able, and we did that in every one of our zones, because if we need to put a city's transformer
City.
someplace or something like that,
Mm.
we didn't want to have it.
Okay, so Reichert, if you feel like you got enough to start there?
Yeah, I've got.
Okay. Any other discussion needed on that? No? Okay. Discussion item number 2, adopting the Washington County Water Conservancy District Landscape Ordinance. I know that we didn't have a lot of time to look through this. I don't know
I did.
how informed you feel on it.
Word.
Well, I read it. There's a lot of times we gotta analyze what we read and try to figure out.
I think the only thing that I saw.
Oh, hold on. Let me start out with staff.
Oh, go
Sorry,
ahead.
I didn't.
Yeah, so this item is coming before you because the Washington County Water Conservancy District has given us a template ordinance to adopt, and then also provided as supporting documentation is the ordinance that Santa Clara City adopted that's based off of that template. And some of the things that stand out in this ordinance want to take note of are some of the requirements that they have for single-family and two-family residential water efficiency standards and multifamily residential and non-residential water efficiency standards. Some of the specifics required here are hot water recirculation systems on each of those, both single-family and multifamily and non-residential uses. The requirement of water sense labeled fixtures like faucets, toilets, urinals. And then on top of that, landscape standards that are applicable to anything that's irrigated with municipal water. There's a limit in those landscape standards, and for both multifamily residential and single family residential and non-residential uses, there's a limit to how much area can be used. The irrigated landscape area, it's limited for single family to 16% of the lot square footage.
significant.
and the lawn area cannot exceed 8% of that total square footage.
Hot water thing recycling.
It's not in that. So what you guys are looking at is the current Tokerville ordinance. What they're looking at is the is it
Santa Clara.
Santa
Clara's?
Clara
That's
City.
not-
And so Santa Clara's does have a lot more, like he said,
Mhm.
single family residence versus multifamily, hot water recirculation stuff that we don't have in ours. I did compare the two and it seemed like it definitely had a lot more, it had more I's crossed, did that kind of thing, whatever. One question I do have is what we were talking about carving out a historic area or that type of thing. I didn't see that in here. And I thought you had said that it came from Santa Clara.
It did. Santa Clara actually just finished drawing up their map. So what this is, and this is coming before you, this ordinance has actually been before Planning Commission before when the district first did this a year or so ago. So obviously Tokerville City is part of, with the water district, we're part of the regional water supply, that regional water supply agreement. So every other city that is involved in the regional water supply has passed either this ordinance or a version of this ordinance. And so it is expected from cities in that there will be some version of this passed because it acknowledges that we are trying to be water smart and water conscious in a drought. So some cities have done it. The other thing is we've had residents that have approached the council about the water district is offering, and it's actually done through the state. They're doing a grass rebate where if you take out your grass and you put in, water efficient landscape, xeriscape, the others, then you actually can get a rebate from the district. We've had our residents come and ask us, hey, we wanted to rip out our grass and get the rebate from the district. And the district is telling us that Tokerville has not passed a water efficient landscape ordinance, which is true. That is one of the requirements from the state. That if
We
the state
also
gave them-
contractually agreed in the
Correct.
regional water supply agreement
Yes.
that we would adopt one. We've never had.
And
We're
we
the
just
only
have
city that
not.
has.
And they've been asking, we're like, yeah, we're working on it.
We're working
And they're
on
like, we're working on it. Well, you can see this is 2021. So we've been working on it for a minute.
So I think
So-
just reading through it, and I did compare it to our old one, and I was here when we actually looked at that one before.
Yep.
I can definitely see where it does have more things included that I think we want to see. My question specifically was, how did they do a carve out? And also, I do know that Wayne and Darren had met to discuss those kinds of things as far as,
That was different, wasn't it?
no.
Well,
it's
nope,
the
this
same
is for
thing.
the same thing.
Just
This
the
is a
zone.
component of this.
So one of the thoughts that I had in that is to say, if we're trying to follow a historic idea, then we could look at our historic overlay, development over HDO, I think is what it says, which is basically, it does tell you from the bridge on the north of town to the Nagley old building is the historic district. So the carve out would allow for and it does talk about all new construction. So if you have it now, you're not held to it unless you were to remove 50% of what you have now, then you can't go back.
Yep, rehabilitated landscape.
Right,
That's
but
what it's called.
but things that are in that carve out, if for example, the Nagley sold their little ag property over there and somebody was going to build a home on it, they could keep it in that greener belt look. That to me makes a lot of sense to say, hey, let's, maybe we would say, and I know you guys met, and I don't know what was discussed in that conversation, but maybe it is just the historic district, which is called out by that northern bridge to the Nagley property, both sides of State Route 17.
And so going along with that, what Santa Clara did is we actually went to a meeting. It was the mayors and the city managers at the water district. And what Santa Clara had proposed for themselves, and Hurricane actually did it also, is they identified, a couple of things. One about the Santa Clara ordinance that's in front of yours. The one that Santa Clara did, it included, they were very specific. They wanted gardens, they wanted orchards, they wanted to maintain their trees, they wanted to maintain that feel that when you think of Santa Clara being very green, which is very our vision as well. So their ordinance actually calls out that they will still have orchards. They will still be allowed to have these things. So what the district was trying to establish this is that all new development will be held to 0.59 acre feet per year. of use. That is what it is. After that, there is going to be a very big surcharge. People will pay a lot of money for water, and that's to help people get more conservative. We think that with some of our development that it will, a couple of things were proposed. One of them is, so as Firelight builds out, they will use far less than the 0.59. Theirs is probably realistically closer to like 0.2, 0.3. Like, I mean, it's just not a lot. So one of the things that Hurricane was asking is they said, hey, is there a possibility that our city as a whole could comply with this 0.59? So what it is if you have a current, the current standard is 0.89. And they want everybody that's new development to reduce that to 0.59. So whatever you have, that's fine. But what they want is new development to be held to this 0.59 standard. So it doesn't affect anybody here. It's new development. The other thing is, it would be all new building permits. So what Santa Clara said was, okay, but this is our issue with that. Downtown, we have these great big lots that are already platted. The people just need to pull a building permit. We don't want that held to a 0.59 standard in downtown Santa Clara. So they asked if they could create a map, and they identified about 60 lots downtown that currently exist that are these great big lots, that if somebody gets that, if somebody comes in and buys one of those lots, they will not be held to that 0.59 standard that the new development would be held to, because the way the district had it, it was all new development will be held to 0.59. So what Santa Clara did, they went through, they looked at their downtown, they identified an area with a map. This is where we were talking about with Wayne and Darren, identifying an area, like you said, maybe from the bridge to Nagley's and both sides of Toker Boulevard. That's part of the discussion of this, is identifying an area that we feel would be that. Hurricane has done the same thing. They developed theirs based on anywhere that their old canal company was. They're like, that's what they decided. Would anything that would be irrigated would be that. So that's part of what we're looking at. So with Santa Clara's, what we've given you is a version of that the district is proposing. We gave you Santa Clara's so you could see some of their changes. Now, I will tell you this, that again, going off of looking at what other people have done, what other cities have done, the importance of that, of even pulling from both of those, Santa Clara passed an ordinance, and that ordinance meets the district's requirement for the grass rebate. The ordinances that both Laverican and Hurricane passed did not meet the standard for the rebate. So they're in a situation where they've passed a landscape ordinance. People are ripping out their grass, going over the district, trying to get a rebate, and the district is not approving the rebate because their ordinance doesn't match it. So what we would like to do is take the version of the districts, Santa Clara's, that we know does work. We'd like to come up with some sort of a hybrid of this, because we are, like I said, and like Attorney Snow said, we are part of the regional water supply agreement. We are expected to help conserve water. And
Just
so
real quick, and so what did Santa Clara do for that carve out? It's not in this. So did you say they
identified about 60 lots. They
So
they
where
passed
did-
their
where-
ordinance
where-
first.
Okay, and so how did they do that part of it? How did they identify the 60 lots? Is that in a separate
They
document of some sort?
Yeah, what they did is they actually created a map. They outlined what they wanted for those 60 lots. They literally created their own map and
Mhm.
said, this is what we would want. And they went and met with the water district. And the water district was like,
Well,
yeah, if that's your
separate from this
historic
ordinance.
districts, then it's that.
separate from
Exactly.
their ordinance.
This ordinance was passed long before they created that map. They created that map within the last couple of months.
Isn't
So-
there a revision coming?
Yeah, are they going to revise their ordinance?
That's what they're
to
doing now.
reference that map?
That's what they're doing now.
So-
But they
so
went
that-
ahead
Doesn't
and
it need to be
passed
so-
this.
That's what I was
Yes.
trying to get
An
at, is how
exemption.
do I do that with this ordinance if we do
Mhm.
want to do that?
And
It-
just so
that can
you
be
know,
easily done.
What Wayne and I did, we never finalized it. We just kind of got together and brainstormed at different things. So
So Wayne, just based on what I said, as far as that historic district and that, does that fit roughly with what you would want to see or think should be in that?
No, kind of, but it depends on the time and date, the date line, because historic to me is 1800s, early 1900s.
Right.
But we went a little more into what I knew was always irrigated property since I've been here. But if we want to go historic, then you're going to be cramped into
Okay.
bridge to wineries.
We want to preserve a corridor that's always green and
Right.
isn't brown because of watering restrictions and stuff like that. And I can appreciate the historical side of it, but I think it's almost more of what what do we want, like one of our
An
main
aesthetics
corridors
type, yeah.
of the city
Right.
to look like?
Which is what Santa Clara did. Hurricanes was a little more historic based. Santa Clara's was like, we like our downtown green.
And I don't have a problem with that either. So we're looking for direction to give staff again tonight. So if you guys have, I don't know if I don't know that you were able to look
I
at
think we're
Santa
close,
Clara's.
but we probably maybe overdrawed some of it.
Yeah.
Now
I
listen,
think- I think
listening
s-
to what they want, we could revisit that line and
I personally
fair.
I like what Santa Clara has. I do think it calls out a lot, almost like the RV ordinance that we went through and looked at. We're like, wow, look at all these other things that were in there that we didn't see. So I like that. And so direction will be, I think we should move that direction if everybody kind of agrees.
Yeah.
And then we need to kind of finalize that, that area that we say, hey, we want this to stay green.
So are you saying from the North Bridge to Nagley's, just down the main road? Or are you saying
No,
basically
no,
the whole?
no.
That's what I
whole
think we
town?
need to kind of
No.
finalize.
Because I
with
think
this
it should be
another
the
meeting.
whole.
I agree
I'm
with
just
that.
picturing 1969. What was, I know exactly what was irrigated and what was fields and what was homes and fields. And if we,
Yeah, and I
Cholla
only-
Creek, we maybe went too far, but Cholla Creek was always irrigated down along the creek. So that's kind of how we
So
did
then-
it, but we could,
In the process of
Tighten it
this,
up, I guess.
coming up with this ordinance that we're going to create, that we meet and figure out what that exactly, that area is, so we can define that.
Okay.
like a copy of that from the Conservancy District.
So this,
Right,
this,
or- had that.
One comment that I'd like to add to it when you're putting together a draft, something that you guys need to notice, and it's somewhat hidden and not clear and expressed, but I'd like it to be expressed in ours. You notice that what it has standards, residential landscape design standards, and it has commercial, they refer to it as,
Non-residential or something.
yeah, commercial, industrial, and institutional landscape standards. What they don't have is they don't have any landscape standards for agricultural. And that's omitted, but they don't, because they know they're not supposed to regulate water use in agricultural zones, which is another reason why we don't want to leave it to chance to have people rezone to R120, because then we're not beholden to regulating through landscape and water conservation ordinances irrigated property too. But I'd like to see you put just an express, very clear that properties zoned and used for agricultural purposes are exempt from this ordinance. It's not regulated under the draft that they gave us to use, but they weren't very clear about it. But I want to make sure we're clear on that.
I think that's a good point. Thank you.
okay. And then, so then the next time that this comes before you then, because it'll be an ordinance and obviously a land use, it will require a public hearing. And so, so if you can have any changes that you want to Riker long before, we have a 10-day notice to do that. So it will we'll need your changes.
And likewise, I would really like to see it come back to planning commission before the day before the meeting. So these
10 days in
everybody
advance.
has the ability to look through that and understand it.
Mhm.
Technically, we should have a draft 10 days in advance.
Yes, for
Does-
sure.
Yeah, we
Does
should
the
have
public
draft
and-
ordinance
and
10 day
for
in
you
advance
How much teeth does the Conservancy District have in that?
in the
I
landscape
don't want to
ordinance.
be tied to those guys at all. If they have, I don't want to be controlled by them, because once you're controlled by them, you're controlled. So more Tokerville into it, so we're not getting into something that's over-regulated and we hurt people.
I think that's where it's going to be important to say that all existing stays the same, all ag is not regulated. I think that's going to be really kind of keep them off of that maybe.
So we'll get,
All new stuff coming in, I don't know how we would
we'll get a
really
copy
say
of this
it.
that we can see before.
Yeah,
You'll have a copy 10 days, as long as you can get the changes to
in
Riker.
our SharePoint.
In there,
so
in
we
your
have it.
SharePoint, 10 days in advance.
So the next meeting is the 10th of May. So that, but we have to get it and see it before we can give changes to it.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to act on it next
Well,
month.
well,
There's
what
no
I'm
way.
saying
Look
is
at the
you'll,
one we have right now that we can look at today and send changes now.
That's what we
And then
have.
he'll
We're
have
asking.
those changes before the
Yes.
10 days that we have to review what we're going to discuss.
Look at the one from Santa Clara, you mean?
Yeah.
We'll look at both of them. Look
Yeah.
at the draft one and the Santa Clara one.
Yeah, if
And
there's,
anything
and if
you
there's
want
something there
changed in
you
addition to
absolutely
what's
don't
been
want, you
said.
don't think is Tokerville, take it, scratch it out, send it, say,
Send
not,
it to
not this
Riker.
paragraph and send that to.
So you'll
Riker.
take these documents that you have, you'll redline those and you'll submit them to Riker. He'll take all of your changes, he'll put them into an ordinance format, clear it with Heath, and then you'll have that to review at least 10 days prior to the next meeting.
So-
So at the next meeting, you'll be able to come back with red lines of that draft ordinance.
So are we doing it the same way as Santa Clara? Or are you going to have a map or a description?
Map,
of the-
it'll be a
of the
map,
historical
probably a
area?
combination of both.
So we'll do them both at the same time instead of.
Yep.
And then a
Yeah,
reference.
Santa Clara put their ordinance into effect. The district in 2021 wanted this passed. They put theirs into effect almost immediately. And then they identified some other things. They're like, oh, we kind of wish we would have done this and that. And so now they're taking it back and revising their ordinance and including that map in it. What we did is we held back and we said, this is brand new. Let's let everyone else do it and we'll see what they learn. Here we are.
Right.
So
Okay.
almost, year and a half later. So that's where we are. So if you will take those, drop whatever they are, if you don't want to write on it, if you
See
do,
what Mayor
if you want to
Rosenberg
come in and
was.
meet with
Very
Riker
bright man.
and give him yours.
Riker, and, he can also put these into Word format. So when we get a PDF, we can't change them. But if he sends them to you in Word, then you can
Yeah,
kind
you
of go
can do
through and
your
redline
redline.
them and
You
do
can do
whatever you
redline,
want
yeah.
to. So maybe, I don't know, that'd probably be easier to, I don't know how you'd want.
As long as if you're redlining that you're
What's the most
that
efficient way for
leaving
you to
it-
get it, I guess?
leave the original and put your changes in the red.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Any other discussion on that? We've given them direction. I think we're there. Okay, then we will move to the number F, business item F3, discussion, nightly rental ordinance for commercial developments in an MPDO. Staff.
Okay, so in the March 15th city council meeting, city council directed the planning commission to take this ordinance regarding nightly rental development in MPDO commercial zones and to go through it and recommend revisions. And legal is here to advise on that.
I really don't have any advice, other than I know the council really wanted to see that there was a rental cap, a cap on the number of short-term rentals based off of, because
That
again,
either.
what?
Oh, I didn't get this.
Oh, that they wanted a cap on the number of short-term rentals in an MPDO zone being a percentage of the overall permitted ERUs. So that the entire MPDO doesn't become an STR. And I think that there was discussion, motion, and it died at 6%, something like that. But
Was
and there
proposed-
wasn't a firm written provision in there. But I think what Councilmember Campbell's direction was is just, and if there's anything else that you want to, direct staff to modify.
Right. So this ordinance actually came through planning commission and then it went to council and then council sent it back to planning commission. And Joey's motion was that you could go through this ordinance, see any changes that you wanted to make. They did want you to look specifically at some sort of a cap, whether that's a percentage or what it is. And then any other changes that you see with this city does not currently have a way to address nightly rentals in a commercial zone. And so even in our new nightly rental ordinance that you're looking through, that you're going through, it does not address commercial. And so this obviously went through here. This one would limit it specifically to the MPDO areas. So anyway, so they just said, go through this, see what you think. This one will have a public hearing at the next one also. So same situation. But they want to see what you think about, like they said, there was a cap. So the discussion at the council level, which you can look at the minutes, you could watch it on YouTube. The discussion at the council level was that Ty had made a motion at capping it at 10% of whatever their base density is, their base ERUs. Ty had made a motion to cap it at 10. Gary thought it should have been closer to 5. There was discussion where they were looking at it at 6. And then they voted it down because they could not come up with a percentage, an exact percentage.
To 8. And
Yeah,
then-
Ty made a
was the
motion at
motion.
8 and the motion was then actually, and it did not carry. And so Joey recommended that that direction would be given to Planning Commission for you guys to go through this, see if there was anything else that you wanted to change and to come up with some sort of percentage or a cap or something that you think to address.
Because when it came from us, we all recommended that it not be approved.
Right.
And so in watching the city council, if I'm correct, Joey was saying, see if the planning commission can make it palatable for us to get to some point where we
Yes.
could recommend it.
Yes.
So for me personally, I really struggle with this whole thing. I think nightly rental in a commercial should be managed in a way the same as the RV ordinance. Block it out, put walls up, put your own, and in our ordinance, it does state that certain amenities that they have to have,
Yeah.
but it would be much more palatable to me if it was standalone on its own and more restrictive than just saying, here, you can build it in an open area.
And in this, and also Daisy, will you pull up, this is from Bruce Jenkins, but the other one that, this one, if you'll pull it up, we pull up the other ordinance that's in there. This is a licensing ordinance. So this is not something that Planning Commission is being asked to look at. This will exist within the licensing section of the code. So it won't, but they did Joey wanted this, he just wants you guys to be aware that there is the management of this has already been addressed. That's a licensing issue and it exists in a different part of the code other than that. So even as you go through this code, the licensing portion of it would not be what you would have to look at. So that's just one thing that was speaking to what you were saying, Stacy, is that, yeah.
So watching that council meeting, I was there and then I was also directed at the last one to make these changes. Joey was talking about percentage of ERUs, base ERUs. He was also talking about maintaining a 20% controlling interest in the
There was
in
that
the
discussion.
development or that kind of thing. And then let's see, was there anything else that he said? I actually think that might be the only things he brought up. So when you look at it, what we were originally presented with, and my understanding is that it was a nightly rental development that you could put in any one of 9 commercial developments, and they could have between 30 and 300, depending on detached or attached, that kind of thing. There was really no limit to say how many in this whole MPDO they could do. So when I heard the council meeting, it definitely, to me, it made sense to hear him say, hey, let's cap it to the baseline ERUs. And then we do actually have control. We wouldn't have this possibly, 900, I don't know what number it would have been.
And just to add to that, I'm thinking about, as you said, that it came back. What Ty's main driver for that is he said, I don't want to see all these commercial areas that we think are critical and are economic benefits to the city being eaten up by short-term rentals.
And that's been one of my gripes for sure,
Which
is that
makes
I think that when you
made
bring
sense
this,
when he said it.
when
too.
you bring in this number of people, we're going to have areas to commercial areas to be able to accommodate them. So I think finding that percentage for me, I mean, it's kind of, here it is again. And now we've been told to tear it apart because they want something there. Let's come together and figure out what we're going to do with that to make it work. I wrote down a couple of things, and this is just can be starting point, and I'm whatever you guys want to say. But underneath, and I don't have that ordinance in front of me, but it talks about nightly rental development minimum and maximum requirements. In it says a minimum 30 detached, 60 attached dwellings per nightly rental development, and then it says 200 or 300 maximum number. I think that something like that should get eliminated, and then we would say B, maximum number of dwellings within a commercial nightly rental development combined shall be limited. The maximum number of dwellings within all commercial nightly rental developments combined shall be limited to 3.5% of the baseline ERUs of that MPDO. And that, so if we were to say 5% on they have 1,700 acres, their underlying zoning is
Just
two homes per acre, so they could have 3,400. So the baseline ERU would be 5% of 3,400, which comes out to 170. Now that 170 would apply to the whole MPDO. That doesn't mean that they would have just 170 in one area. They may actually have smaller developments that could be 30 to 60, maybe spread out throughout. That's the way that I see it. And I don't know what their plan is.
I think with the requirements, and sorry, this would have to be put on with the firelight cap on. I think with the requirements, the amount of amenities that are required to try to keep people captivated and not utilizing city recreational areas and stuff like that. I don't know that financially it would be
60 would make
feasible to break them up into a bunch of small ones that would probably.
Yeah, and I would rather
so
that
they
it
would
didn't do
leverage
that.
on the amenity.
Purposely concentrated.
Right. Right.
Only the.
And so with that in mind, that could be how our ordinance says it is, I don't know how to word that to say, I don't know. I was looking at if this wasn't your project
Yep.
and we were applying it to any other person who has acreage, they could do an MPDO. How would we want to regulate that? So, I'm fine with it not being that small. That would be fine.
Did you say they could have 170 is what you're saying?
If we said,
Max?
now we're looking
on the
at, we're
ERUs?
looking at, for example, the one that we know is out there. They have 3,400 homes that they could build. And so the ERU is equivalency residential units. So that's how many homes they are permitted to build. They do have a base density, they have a bonus density of another 30% based on open spaces and that thing they give us. I think it would be better to base it off of baseline, not bonus density stuff. So you have 1,700 acres, that means 3,400 homes, 5% of those ERUs, which is 5% of the 3,400 would give you 170 for that whole MPDO. Now, putting it in a blocked in area, making it be its own separate development as opposed to just like this area of homes out there,
Can we ask
I think that's
a question? For
that
him?
was my question.
I was going to ask him if you would like to speak on it anyway.
So if you did,
residential, you want
if this happened and you got the 170,
but in
Kinda like
I would assume you'd want to build them in one big of a
Would you
lot.
hold that?
Yes, in fact, in the MPDO that is approved, if nightly rentals are approved for MPDOs, we are already committed to putting them only in the town center. That's the only place.
See, they had to, they have a commercial use table and it has the 9 different commercial areas. And the only one is commercial area 3, which is the town, known as the town center, is the only place where short-term rentals are allowed. So beyond even expanding it out into the other,
I think
commercial
that's very
planning
smart
areas.
because you're not impacting residents as much if they're all in a group,
Yeah, I like that.
whatever the number is going to be.
So how does that work? Where
we will-
they don't have
and they would-
control of the 1,700 acres.
always drag out.
They're doing it in stages. So how do you do that if they eat up all of that and then they don't end up buying the rest
Not
of it?
this.
I'll leave this place right here.
Hey guys, hold off just a second. I want to hear both conversations.
Makes sense to me.
Because we don't want them here.
Yes,
We don't want them
I
here.
understand that.
All in one place.
Yeah.
Which makes sense, and that's what we would
Yeah.
like to have as well. The previous ordinance, without seeing that developer agreement and what's permitted, was wide open, and we don't have a lot of look at that developer agreement. So
Require that of future MPDOs that they specify where.
specific areas.
That could be part of the ordinance.
I think the thing that threw all of us like a red flag up was the 200 to 300.
Yeah, that's 2,700
Per
units.
commercial
Times
development,
3
and we
or
don't know
times
where they
9.
could all be. So
Right.
you might put 3 in commercial space 3 or whatever.
That was 2,700 through their 9
It
developments.
definitely was way open. You guys were having a conversation. Would you?
In fact, I'd like that to be taken off there because every time I see it, it aggravates me a little bit. Because it shouldn't be on there now because we need to create that.
Well, so what we can do is we can we can use this as a guideline and pick it apart, tear it apart, rebuild it however we want. Yeah, knowing that they do want some type of a commercial development.
I think you're on track. I think that's a.
So my question was,
Hold on a second.
Not
if we're
opposed to
basing it off of ERUs on 1,700 acres and you're piecemealing this as you go along, how do we tie that so that, I guess you tie it same with ERUs?
Just try to ERUs. That's,
Mhm.
yeah, that's the point.
As-
They'll get their bonus density, they don't get it. If they don't.
But if they don't buy the whole 1,700 acres, then, and they just built 170 units based on 1,700 acres, how do you,
Well, it'd
What's
be
the
based on the
mechanism there?
ERUs that they
rest of
have.
They can go up to that, they just can't hit more than a max.
so then the rest of 17 acres, whoever
Can't
has
do
it.
Yeah, it's been harvested and put in one place.
The development agreement runs with the land, so it does.
Yep, that's
All
right.
That's how we're dealing with it.
And I heard just one other thought in this, and this is directed to you, is that does Firelight intend on limiting the nightly rentals in the residential areas through CCNR?
Yes, in fact, we've already committed to that.
Yeah, that was the one selling point that I don't think that everyone needs, I think is important, and I'm not trying to sell it, but it's like, right now, we put a moratorium, council put a moratorium on our short-term rental because we were worried about how many short-term rental permits we were getting here in town. And you've got a whole area that says we will not do it anywhere except for in one congregated central
Center.
commercial area.
And I think that's, I mean,
And-
it's
and
all
then-
makes it more palatable.
And then you're
for
putting
sure.
it on to the HOA to be your police,
But-
which
but-
neighbors are great at that.
But the other side of all of that is these things can be changed and all of that through HOAs and CCNRs can get amended or whatever. So some of that can go away, but I think it's awesome that we would have it all in one area and it's not this, we have numbers that are limited as opposed to just who knows where they're going. And
See,
how-
Firelight sees it being intermixed nightly rentals as being not a good thing in their residential developments. They only see it as a good thing in a congregated, planned area.
We want to protect our neighborhoods from.
Yeah, understandable. And it's kind of why we're looking at a nightly rental in residential area as well, so.
We
Okay,
also-
so-
yeah.
So I have one more concern. UTVs, ATVs, off-highway vehicles that are legal to drive on streets and roads. How do you limit that so that that doesn't become a problem? Because the city, I don't know that the city can prohibit licensed vehicles, but
No, we
It's-
can't
it's-
discriminate against licensed
no,
vehicles.
but they can, as a development, say you have to trailer in and out of your development certain types of vehicles, so that we're not listening, so the rest of the residents aren't listening to the noise. It's not the vehicle, it's the noise.
Yeah, I think there are ways to do these things.
Well, we need to, you're protecting your neighborhood, but we need to, I've stressed this before, is we need to protect our neighborhood. Because there's two roads coming into town from your development to go up to there, and that's the point I was trying to put.
Can I make an easy suggestion? Our state OHV ordinance statutes say that as a municipality, we can designate certain roads that you can use street legal vehicles on.
I think
And
that's a great
if we
idea.
wanted to,
Hurricane has
if
done
we
that.
wanted to restrict the two that are coming out of Firelight, that way, and people are driving on it, officers cite them. And they're saying, well, we're street legal. Yeah, well, city of St. George, everything is street legal. In Leeds, only down through their main street is legal.
So we'd have to be careful that we're not dumping somebody's problem onto somebody else's street. If
They
we
might be
throw it
going
onto
back
Churchill,
towards Leeds.
It's already on my street.
We're gonna have a problem, we do that.
right.
Well, I'm just saying.
It's not right.
I'm just saying, or we designate it where there's one way. But any way coming out of Firelight is going to,
Roads, don't let people drive their RVs out there.
Riker, are you getting all these points down, man? So you're writing that. Okay, so I'm
Following you.
gonna just give you some
Side
things
by
that I
side.
would like to maybe see it written in a new form of ordinance, and that would be so I do want to go back to the 30 to 60. What is a number that would make it financially viable to do a nightly rental development? How many? What's the minimum number?
I think, yeah, Scott has told me they looked at, with the number of amenities that this ordinance requires, what, didn't you say it had to be 200 in order to make it?
Yes, which is 7%. And I hate to give you my minimum right off the bat.
Yeah, that was not, that, I didn't like to hear that.
No, I don't want to hear that either because that's,
You're baiting him and now you're baiting me
yeah.
because, yeah, he's gonna shoot high and I'm gonna shoot low. And yeah, I don't, that was
Right.
not.
But it would be nice to know if we were to create an ordinance, what that, minimum number might be. But however we come up with it, we could say a minimum of 100 detached, 150 attached, and then the maximum being based on a percentage of ERU or whatever. So put that down as a minimum number.
Just, yeah, I don't
That's
even
what I
know.
was gonna
don't
say.
even
They-
You know
know
what?
I think you need to get
Attached or
That's
If you
right.
just do it
'Cause they'll
based off
decide if they wanna
ERUs,
do it or not.
yeah, if you do it
That's-
based off ERUs,
That's a good point.
the
Why do we
200,
care if it's 2 or?
that's
yeah.
theirs.
Yeah. I don't even,
First
Just
problem.
I'm glad somebody brought that up. Okay, then the maximum number of dwellings within a commercial nightly rental development combined shall be limited to 3%, 5% of baseline ERUs of that MPDO. Primary access to nightly rental development shall be from a collector roadway.
Okay, so wait a minute, did you say 3 or 5%?
So I want him to put a range that we can, when we look at it, we can decide on what to go with. But whatever percentage it is
Collector?
that we come up with.
They designate my street as a collector. 49 and a half foot street is a collector. I don't want all their access going up this street. I don't want them going up the other street. I don't want to go up Center Street.
I agree. That's
You
why I
can
think,
see-
I think the
No.
development should require
the
the
way-
developer
the way-
to
the way-
trailer it all.
Not
The
just
way it
for
was,
myself.
the way it was written said that it had to have its primary access off of the parkway.
So, and the reason
That
I,
gets them there, but then from there, they go anywhere
Okay.
they want.
so the
Well,
reason,
That's where I
the reason,
say you ought to adopt
It'll be
a
tweaked.
road designation area for OH fees and
the
street
problem
level
with that is that applies to Firelight. Now, let's say we have another one and they have another road that comes in. How do we say off the parkway, right? So
A number,
Is
of,
there
a,
a
number
way-
of, a number of years ago, Heath, and I think you were around for this. The city council designated certain roads within inside Tocqueville
Yeah.
City about the same
Seems to me
size.
like we did that.
So it seems like Ash Creek was one of them.
We only have
One of them.
a few.
Yeah, I think
We
there's-
we ought to go back and look. That sounds familiar to me.
remember that.
That we,
And I think we could do
Yeah,
the
that's
same
already
thing.
done.
Things have changed though now.
yeah,
And we ought to
the
revisit.
only reason I wanted to change that is the parkway may not be where the next one comes in if they're trying to do it. And I didn't want to have it tied to the parkway if it's another MPDO that
well,
comes in.
but I
So-
will, I will.
think it
take
would be-
But
back.
I think that's good if you say
Um,
the main road going into the development is the only access.
Well, I would-
The other thing to consider is that I think I understand addressing the side by sides with specifically to these nightly rental developments. But I also think that talking about the ordinance that these two were just talking about what streets and designating streets
Yeah.
is because I think as we look at land planning down in the future and look out, it's important to look not just at this, but I think it's naive to think that up at Anderson Junction, we're not going to have somebody put in a side by side business. They exist in Hurricane, they exist in Laverton. There's there's going to be a reservoir. There's Tocqueville Falls is one of the most heavily used side by sides here. So I think it's naive to think that only Firelight is going to be using side by sides. We could have somebody put in a side by side business right here, right next to Anderson Junction. And we can't control that if it's a permitted use. If rentals are a permitted use, they're permitted. So I mean, I'm just saying with what we're seeing in just honesty and transparency with what we're seeing of people coming to the city with the side-by-side situation. We're in southern Utah. We're the only place building a reservoir right now, and we have Tocqueville Falls. So the side-by-sides are not going to be specific to Firelight. That's why I think, I mean, if you want to put something in here, but it might make sense for us to revive some sort of the ordinance. I'm just saying the direction for right now tonight might also be to get that ordinance in front of you as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a good idea. Mine specifically
That's what I
was
was just-
for access to this nightly rental development. So
And Sean, I was going to say to you, if you think about, based on the size requirements for the MPDO zone, I think the only tracts of land that we have here, unless there's going to be some major annexation, is actually the Lowe's and Litchfield are all properties accessed by the Parkway.
Okay, now if that,
So-
and if that makes sense, if that's the case.
Yeah.
And you know, and
I
further
can just see a
annexation.
wedding venue with 40, 50, 60 in a row running by there all day long on that
I
street.
can too. I
That's
think
the
we need to
that
figure
street
out how
is
to.
so unfair
Yeah.
to do that to that
Why
street.
are we picking on wedding venues?
No, it's not fair. I just do make
Hey,
close
Sean, I
like
get it.
Tocqueville Falls,
I get the
you know?
trade jokes too all the time.
Make it go
Yeah.
away.
Okay,
That's a hardship on you for sure.
Just one other thing I would like to address in there, and because Commissioner or Councilman Campbell had said it, and that is entity maintaining 20% of controlling interest. Don't know how that looks, what that looks like, how it's. Yeah, we'll take a look at that and see if there's anything we can figure out in that realm.
There's lots of other
Yeah.
restrictions. that I don't know.
I'm guessing Councilmember Campbell is looking at that from a perpetual maintenance type standpoint. And I think that property management and the mere fact of the nature of short-term rentals and how they have to be clean and accommodating.
Well-maintained.
But again, I understand. That was Councilmember Campbell's thought was, how can I, if I require them to have some retained skin in the game, is that going to keep the maintenance
But these are
perpetually?
already
But I guess-
investors and they already want to protect their.
Their skin in the game is make sure they can rent them out. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then one other is, it said 8 hours a day on site management. Knowing how that rentals go, the party starts at night, so 8 hours a day. To me, it seems like it might be a 24-hour type thing.
that's where in that other ordinance, if you want to read
The
through that one, in
management.
the management one, it actually, yeah, you could read through it. It takes care of this
They have
portion.
to have one, at least,
yeah.
depending on the size, at least one.
Yeah,
full-time
so we've
staff.
included this in your packet so that you can read through it too.
We didn't actually have
and
it
then,
in our packet.
Yeah, she put it in there tonight. Just, I said,
Okay,
Bruce would
all right.
like them to be able to take a look at there, and Joey wanted that too.
Right,
that You
right.
can take a look in it. So it will, it talks about ownership interest. It talks about the management. It talks about how
So
soon they have to be on site.
Specifically, how does it address that 8 hour
Right.
thing?
See
I'm
right here,
curious.
the local property managers will be available 24 hours a day to respond to the tenant neighborhood questions or concerns. And then, then if you keep going.
So
days
then
and
it,
nights.
it wouldn't be bad to change the ordinance, say 24 hours in, because
Yeah.
it's,
And,
They're in
and,
a big clump like that.
mhm.
I mean,
Well, and that's,
you know, from what
that's
I've
another
seen down there,
reason
they're in a big clump like that. That's almost self
you have to.
control because I don't see anything can get out of control in a mass because
Yeah.
somebody's going to be complaining
Well,
in 5 minutes right there anyway.
And that's why size, not having it in a condensed setting, almost precipitates having full-time staff because the sheer number
However-
of maintenance and
talking
Administrative
to,
costs.
talking to
Yeah.
Hurricane and about I think it's Sand Hollow development. They all think that's an absolute mess, and it is all together and all of those things. So
yeah, they have.
I do think
they're
that,
in trouble.
yeah, unfortunately, sometimes these things get rented out for parties and things like that. So I wouldn't want to say, oh yeah, that just because they're all together, it can't get out of control, because I'm sure that it could. So.
They have their management.
can I also make just another suggestion? Dealing with this in Virgin, they have a somewhat of an STR overlay zone. They're looking at now revising it to put a size limitation on the homes because they don't want to have big party houses.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that you can't, like if you got a big family, you might have to rent two
Or three, yeah.
or three of them. But it doesn't kind of create, they just don't want to see the Red Bull banner hanging over there at Red Bull Rampage.
Well,
This
and
massive
the-
thing that looks like a quasi hotel in a residential zone.
The ordinance that we have that was there before, it does limit it to 10 people per dwelling and
shows
all
four,
that kind of
four
stuff.
bedrooms.
And it says 4 parking spaces.
Maybe not necessarily size, but occupancy.
Yeah, occupancy,
That's
but no more than 4 bedrooms, that kind of thing. So, yeah,
That way people rent multiples instead of,
yeah. Right, and that's, you're right.
Okay.
Okay, so do we have enough to you to get started on that? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Anybody want to throw more out there? Okay. That takes us to business item F4. Thank you. Staff, please.
Okay, so this item's before you due to increased growth and development. We presented some design standards. These design standards come from Ivan City. Just some background there. We have commercial design so we have design standards for construction and development, and then we also have general commercial design standards. This particular item is to address specifically color schemes. In our code, we only address colors or color schemes in a few places, and most of those are under the general commercial design standards, not the general design standards. Those areas say things such as the architectural style or design should enhance the site's context and shall be harmonious with existing building massing, scale, proportions, color, and materials. And this one applies to national franchise tenants. It says the colors and materials palette utilized by national franchise tenants should complement the overall design theme and surrounding development. In the code from Ivans that we've provided on page 6, if you have that before you, under 16.19.103.1, it specifically mentions structures that blend in with the environment. And again, this is specific to Ivans, but it says, it is the vision of the city that all buildings and their associated facilities and improvements will blend it with forms, colors, and textures of the city's desert setting. The city encourages creative and varied architecture, reflecting its desert character, avoiding extremes and characteristic themes, styles, and colors. The goal is for all man-made structures to blend harmoniously with the natural environment. And it goes on throughout that same section to address color schemes and blending it in with not just the environment, but the surrounding developed area and other developments nearby.
Right where you were again. I think it's important that where it says to preserve and protect, obviously the desert setting, but it says and preserve and increase property values. All proposed uses shall incorporate, the building and site design elements. And then it goes on to say as follows. This is, Chuck has been saying on city council for a very long time that he would like to get some sort of vision, some sort of everywhere that you look, whether it's the general plan or even in our ordinances, just in conversations, even in talking to residents, everybody talks about our small town feel. They talk about our character and they talk about our charm. What this is trying to do is make sure that we don't end up fluorescent. I mean, really, it's trying to preserve some of that where things blend together. We have kind of a feel, a vibe, a theme going on. And we're just trying to make sure that so like he said, we have design standards. We talk about color schemes very vaguely. We would like to move to where, like this, it says, where it's the vision of the city that all buildings and their associated facilities and improvements will blend with the forms, colors, and textures. And it doesn't need to necessarily say desert setting for us. It might say something else, but it might say small town feel. It might say character. But we understand that we're going to have growth, but this is not addressing uses. This is addressing color schemes for throughout the town. So that's kind of where we're going with this.
Who on the?
Is that throughout new development or in this part of town or?
It would have to be new development.
Yeah.
Have to be new
It's
development.
these are the
or
building design
remodel.
requirement. These are buildings, remodels, things like the new building.
You're wanting colors and textures.
Well, we're saying,
If
what
I
we're
want a-
saying is
If I
we're,
want a pink house, you're gonna tell me no? Is that what you're
If
saying?
it's a pink.
it
house.
depends on if it matches what's around it, if it blends well with the forms, the
So do you
colors.
think Firelight is gonna not have their own stuff and now their own development, their own things? I'm trying to figure out what this is
We
specifically.
will,
for.
but it's,
You're trying to control the developers so they can't build pink houses. Something more.
I'm not trying
Just trying to figure out.
Ivan's,
if-
it's
I'm not trying to
Ivan's
control
that's doing
anybody.
If somebody's trying to overbear.
control freak, but not about.
Yeah, nobody
But-
wants a yellow house with all the brown, but don't you guys do your own designs and architectural stuff and it all blends and it fits nice?
It'll be the individual eccentrics that you're worried about.
Yes.
It will be.
We'll just do boring beige.
Like in Laverkin, that down in the valley, as you're going up from Tokerville to Laverkin, if you go over in that subdivision, there is a house that is a bright, horrible color.
Okay, that makes it, I'm trying to, now I understand what we're doing, because I think Firelight is gonna.
They're trying to
take
make-
care of
yeah.
themselves,
Yeah,
but-
yeah.
Blend.
This has nothing to do with firelight.
If somebody
Right.
wants to build a pyramid that's shiny,
So this is for historic Tokerville?
no,
Or-
all
no.
new development in.
Any new
Tokechi.
development?
development.
Yeah. So that if
Just to
somebody,
have some general.
Okay, okay.
yeah, just some
better
cohesiveness.
Guidelines than what we have.
I don't.
We're
I
just,
don't-
yeah, go
Well,
ahead.
I'm sorry.
I don't
I was
see
just gonna
anybody.
say, I don't really feel like I had enough time to go through all the stuff we had. So this one kind of got on the back
This
burner
was a
for me.
lot.
It was too
I would
long.
love to see this again with any recommendations on it. I don't know if you guys have anything.
This one, we're just looking for feedback tonight
Right.
on
Have you-
if this is a road you want to go down, to look at our design standards and say, you know what, actually, yeah, before we end up, I mean,
Everybody good with that?
Yes.
Okay.
like to look
And
at
do you
color
have any-
schemes
Do you
for
have any
our town.
recommendations on that to Riker?
So we're just really
I have
concerned,
a
this is
question
like
for
an
everyone
8-page
else.
long thing.
Just mostly concerned.
Mostly looking at the building design.
Design and coloration,
Colors.
I-
maybe for.
Designs and-
Okay, I got one question here.
My question is, I feel like this stuff is usually the prerogative of developers and CCNRs that come with stuff before us to approve. And I just, I think if we're, when I saw that, that's a lot. And to me, it seems like an HOA took over the city of Ivans. And if I can, I like our town to look nice, of course. But I think if we're going to do design standards like that, I don't necessarily want to go as far as Ivans has.
Okay.
I feel like
And
they've
that's,
gone
this
really
is
far.
just a starting
And
point.
I'd like to just do the basic thing and let Firelight have their creative freedom and see what cool things they bring to us rather than us try to control it for them. I like, limited.
I don't think that it's too, because you're right, Firelight's gonna have their standards and any big area development's gonna have their standards. It's probably more than onesies and twosies and.
Well,
Yeah.
And that's, that kind of stuff.
my question based on those statements are, do you want to direct Riker to look at maybe implementing some of these things into our commercial standards? Because even our commercial standards, and I know the planning commission spent a lot of time on that, but there's a few things like specific colorations, and you really see some bright stuff that come out in commercial zones. It's, yes, you do get the occasional pink house, Wayne, and you're fine to
Yeah.
have one.
We could have a pink motel up there.
But you get some very bright neonish
Oh,
looking
do.
stuff in commercial things. And I think that's
Yeah.
one of the things that's driving this from staff, because you have to
Yeah, do
recognize.
you want a 4-story hotel that's fluorescent green? I mean, those are the things we're asking. Maybe you do, but you don't have anything that stops
But
that
my question is,
currently.
do you want to deal with
Maybe
it
we should-
more in just the commercial and not have it applied to the general
Residential.
design standards?
In our ordinance now, the simple subdivision is basically exempt from
Go
this.
through
And
this
so
in
is
next
the
couple of weeks.
next level, which
You know,
it's
cut it out,
eluding
send
me.
it to them.
We're
Phase.
talking
So we can
bigger
discuss
developments
what
that this is applying to, which I'm okay with.
Okay, Riker, you got that? So anything that you guys have, again, that you want to get to Riker on any of this that we're looking at, send it to him hopefully in the next 10 days so he can kind of look at what everybody's input and maybe come up with a plan to present to us. Okay, any other discussion on item 4? Okay, let's go to business item F5. Modifying Title 10, Chapter 11, MU20, multiple use zone. Zoning update including permitted and conditional uses. Riker.
Okay, so this item's before you because in the previous city council meeting, It was identified that some of the conditional uses that are in the MU20 multiple use zone do not match the purpose stated there. And so just to refresh you, the purpose reads, a multiple use district is established in areas of mountain, hillside, canyon, desert, and other open and generally underdeveloped lands where human habitation should be limited in order to protect the indigenous natural beauty of these areas and protect open space resources and to reduce unreasonable requirements for public utility and service extensions and expenditures through unnecessary dispersal and scattering of population, to encourage the use of land where appropriate for grazing, agricultural, wildlife habitat, and recreation, and to minimize water pollution, soil erosion, danger from brushland fires, damage to watersheds, and damage to grazing and livestock habitat and to wildlife habitat and values, and to promote health, convenience, order, prosperity, and general welfare of the inhabitants of the city. In your packets, we provided the multiple use code, and just so that
Permitted and conditional.
the permitted uses here are, in permitted uses, we have accessory buildings and uses customarily incidental to agricultural and grazing uses, agricultural uses, home occupations with current home occupation permit, livestock grazing, single-family dwellings, public or quasi-public uses for essential public services, and public utility uses. Under conditional uses, we have agricultural industry and related business uses, commercial kennels, extraction industry uses as outlined under Chapter 15, private park or recreational grounds or facilities or private camp or resort, including accessory or supporting buildings or dwelling complexes which are owned or managed by the recreational facility and under unified control, radio, television, microwave, or cellular phone transmitting and relay stations and towers, residential facility for persons with disability, and single-family and multifamily dwellings located above commercial space, accessory buildings and uses customarily incidental to the above.
So when you read the purpose on this, I think it's pretty clear that it's trying to maintain a beautiful environment, the creek sides, hillsides, canyon. It also talks about limiting human habitation. And when I first read this, I was like, wow. And then all of these uses that they have that are absolutely contrary to that. So I definitely could see the need to remove some of those for specifically would be like the extraction industry. That seems crazy.
So just to clarify, in our extraction overlay zone, this is the only zone designated for extraction industry.
Well, I would also point out, most cities have an open space zone, an OS. This is essentially Tokerville's equivalent of an open space zone, the MU zone. So there's really not area. I mean, so you got to think about where could we, if there is going to be any sort of extraction.
So right now we have Sitla property, or what used to be Sitla property, that had a conditional use permit for a extraction overlay zone.
Mhm.
So it's going to sit there with that. I don't know how it got BMP, but it's got BMP on it now. So I don't know. We got to look at. I needed to ask you that. That was a good thing we just thought of that. But
So
I know that they had they had MU20 on it when they came through to get that permit, because that was one of the first ones that we ever did, probably 20 years ago or 15 years ago.
So would it be, I guess they could do that because it's tied to MU20 back then, and so they could do that. But if we were to change MU20, because it clearly states keeping it natural and beautiful, and then finding something that we can put an extraction permit into, right, and adopt that in Tokerville.
Well, let me give you an example. Trail Ridge Estates, one of their phases was the hillside, and they actually rezoned one of their phases MU20 because the deal was the Interstate Rock was going to extract it and take it down to, and now they're about to the process. They want to rezone it residential and subdivide it.
Right.
So there is, extraction. I know the mentality of extraction overlay zoning or the permit that goes with it is a mine or something like that. But anytime someone is taking something down, crushing it, and they're not going to use it on site, but move it outside, then it needs a permit like that. And we've got to, so I don't know. This is a tough one because that one is a fairly common conditional use in most open space zones and municipalities. And we don't have a separate open space to kick it to.
Right. That was part of the question when it was coming through council was if some of these conditional uses are removed from MU20, where are they going?
Yeah.
For one. And then the other thing, yeah, obviously got to make the purpose match, you know,
Well,
these different
we-
things.
Yeah.
That was one of the main questions was like, if we agree, we've got to make the purposes match the uses, but if they do come out of this, where are they going? The other thing that I need some clarification on, and Heath, I'm sure you have this, is, and it has to do with annex property. When we annex property, does it come in as MU20? If
Yeah.
it doesn't have a designation,
an
doesn't
an-
it?
The state
So they're
requires us to have an
automatically-
annexation policy plan. And part of our plan says that by default, any property, unless the annexing party is a private property, unless they designate or request in the annexation request, the default zoning will be MU20.
Mhm.
Because that's kind of our holding zone.
Right.
It's yet to be open space, yet to be developed holding zone.
So it is a conditional use. They come through and it's something that we just say, hey, no, extraction does not belong there. We can still hold that.
Or
back.
we could kick it into the BMP zone.
Yeah, that was kind of the question was like,
Which
should
is
it go
kind of
with
our
his
equivalent
business
of an-
manufacturing?
Yeah, it's kind of the equivalent of a lot of cities' industrial zone.
But how are you going to do business like with the example you said of TRE, right? Where they're a subdivision, they're a phased subdivision, four phases up there. And well, now it's going to be, right. And so how are they going to go to business manufacturing to take down? I mean, they're on the hillside and they needed to build, they were going to build some houses. So they went, like you said, MU20 to do that. How are they going to get zoned as business manufacturing and then rezone?
Same way they got rezoned
mean-
to open space. I get, I get what you're saying. I don't know if I
You're
like.
going to approve
kicking it-
business
I don't know if I like it
manufacturing in the
kicking it
middle of a
to-
residential?
No, I don't like
That's-
kicking it to an
Yeah,
I like kicking it to
So,
an open space.
I think so
But we
too.
don't have that, so probably,
I agree with you.
That's my question is, should we be
Yeah.
doing that
probably should.
and move this out?
Yeah, I've always envisioned an one of these types of zones as being for hillsides, canyons and stuff that's
Lands.
sensitive lands and stuff that we
Animals,
want to
pretty.
preserve.
That's what
But not necessarily like a holding zone, an open space entry zone like most cities have.
What
So-
I think the concerns that the council had was, and they asked me for my interpretation of what that fourth conditional use is: private park or recreational grounds or facilities or private camp or resort, including accessory or supporting buildings, dwelling complexes, which are owned and managed by the recreational facility under unified control. That struck me as an undefined version of an RV park or ordinance. And we have someone applying for that zoning, and it became apparent that that's the intended use. And so the council said, hey, we're taking this to the planning commission to eliminate, because we don't think that RV parks meets with the purpose of that Riker just read of the MU20 zone. I would also say I look at single family and multifamily dwellings located above commercial spaces.
Right.
Where do we have commercial, anything commercial in
Right.
MU20?
Yeah. So
Why
I
is
would
that there?
agree.
I have no idea.
I would
Things like that.
say maybe looking at taking the extraction zone and finding another zone for it to fit into.
Or creating an open
Creating an
space.
open
Another
space.
open space, removing the, whoops, I just turned too far.
The single family, multifamily dwellings above.
Located
Yeah,
above
I wanted to go
commercial.
to the other one, the private park recreational grounds. And then also the single family, multifamily dwelling.
Well, there's also the one, too, residential facilities for persons with a disability.
And I can almost,
Is
That
it
might be the
required
place
be
to,
in there?
what?
Is that required Can
No.
Can you
Oh, it's just a
prohibit that?
permitted use if they want to have that there.
We can't prohibit it in a residential zone.
Gotcha.
We can.
So if somebody had a home down there and they had a permit to get,
Yeah,
to do
well,
residential.
and some people may say, wouldn't it be better to put that type of facility in a wide open area, not necessarily?
yeah, I
I'm
don't
not-
know.
I don't know how. it
Title of
goes.
this zone though is multiple use. I mean, so
Yeah.
you can't just get rid of every single use. It's
Yeah.
it's a holding zone. This ordinance is a holding zone for multiple uses. So recognizing that anything that has this could have a ton of different things going on. The other thing that council wanted clarified,
But
was-
we've had people trying to rezone to this thinking that they
Sure.
could do multifamily.
exactly,
as
correct.
you read.
Right.
Right. And the other thing that they wanted to make very clear and really define was, remember, the definition of either the dwelling or dwellings. And if that goes with all of the
That
acreage,
was-
and maybe you can speak to that,
I was
but
just gonna
Remove
say,
that S on
the
there.
single family
Yeah.
dwellings, it has an S, that would be removed. I've heard the conversation.
Or at least put single family dwelling, put in parentheses, one per
one
lot.
unit.
per 20 acres.
Yeah.
Yeah, one per, yeah. 20 acres.
Well, shouldn't we be changing this just MU 120? Doesn't that resolve that?
Or MU. Well, no, MU 20, MU 20.
120
Oh,
does
MU
too.
120.
Because we're.
Same as R120.
R120.
R120 is residential,
with that?
one
I'm
per
cool with
20.
that. Yeah.
That's 20,000
20,000
square feet. But this would be
Oh, yeah,
MU
that
120 would be one per 20 acres.
I remember you saying that at city council.
But he can draft it up and you could edit to clarify that, because that was where the applicant was like, no, I can have as many as I want dwellings.
Well, I explained to them where
Yeah.
we have in other places in our zone, it says you can only have one single family dwelling on a lot. And we have the definition of a minimum lot is 20 acres. So you can only put one
Yeah,
on 20 acres.
20 acres, right.
Can't
but
put-
we can clarify that a little better
Okay.
too. so. Okay, any other comments or?
So are we removing the RV park possibility? That whole thing.
So I think
that whole-
that's- I
That whole
think that's
statement
what-
there
that's
just
what we-
is convoluted.
Well, Councilmember Campbell kept asking me, he said, does this mean an RV park? And I said, I don't think that it does, but I'll tell you what, creative attorneys and
I can see.
developers is going to say that's what that means. And our lack of definitions and the way it's written, yeah, it is an RV park.
Okay, so you've got that as takeout. Is there, we're not taking too much out of mixed use. The mixed use to me is all about keeping it a pretty area and an open space and all of that, lower inhabited.
Yeah, whatever. you want.
There could be maybe some other uses they could throw in there that would fit that.
Either that, or you leave this ordinance the way it is and change you either have to like leave all of these basically and change the purpose
Right. and
of
I
saying
think-
that this is not, the purpose is not open space, it's not whatever, and create an open space zone. But
So that would be the other is
The
to
MU20
look
has to
for
rezone.
a zone that we can put an extraction.
Okay.
Okay, no more comments. We will move to business item F6, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Modifying Title 10, Chapter 17, Article 3, Nightly Rental Ordinance. This is for residential nightly rental areas. Staff?
Yes, so as you know, we were given direction, Planning Commission was given direction by council to go through this ordinance and recommend revisions and changes to it. The one that was provided in your packet has all of the updated red lines. Myself and Commissioner Huntsman met and discussed his comments from the previous meeting and added those in to this version 2 red line. We met and made sure those were consistent and accurate with what he stated in the meeting, and that's what's before you for discussion and possible recommendation today.
And can I just say, it is so wonderful to have those comments when we're looking at things. It helps us to know, where's this coming from? So thank you. Thank you so much. And I went through this. Everything's there that we talked about last council meeting. So
I think for me, it feels complete. There is one question I have, and that is, Maybe I have to steal that and look at it. It talks about numbers of how many you can own in town. I think it's G, I believe. Yeah, nightly rental ownership limitation, neither a natural person applicant nor a principal of a business entity applying for a nightly rental license shall have an ownership interest in more than one.
Oh, we're gonna fix that.
Well, so it's talking about one, and it can be a person owning one, but I had heard the question was posed to me that, well, what if I own one and my wife wants to own one in the same home and that kind of thing? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what you do with that. So, Heath, have you got any suggestions on how you limit this to
I want to know who asked that question. That's
one?
asked like an attorney.
Probably the wife.
That would be one of them. The other one was.
Well, let me ask this
Andrea.
question. Why do we have the requirement in the first place?
To limit the number.
I've always wondered that,
permits. Requirement for what?
that you can only have one or that you can only have two.
Mostly out of fairness, if we're going to go to a permitting process, giving everybody an opportunity, so you don't have somebody owning two and everybody else wanting to own, one.
You can say one person residing in a dwelling, per dwelling.
That's what I put down here, family member within the same household.
Yeah,
So
residing.
residing in the same household or whatever, but
What's
I thought it might be something.
I do have a question. Do you, and this is just my own opinion, just from what I'm seeing, and I could be totally off, but my opinion is that one is too low. Because I think what we're going to end up with is we're going to end up with a ton of, especially if we're going to limit the number of these that we have within the city, say 35 of these, roughly that's what we're looking at, is 36 to 38 of these. I'm just wondering if, I know that we're talking about one per household of this, but I'm just wondering, even on the total of this 5% thing of this, I'm just saying, if we're going to go to this waiting list that we talked about, I'm just wondering if we're just going to end up with a whole bunch of illegal nightly rentals, quite honestly. I mean, Hurricane City just had to hire an entire person to go around and police their nightly rentals as part of code enforcement. And that's the only thing he does. And you know what I mean? So it's costing them a lot of money in enforcement. They have a ton of illegal ones. And I'm not saying that you have to change this from 2 down to 1. I'm not saying that it needs to go from 1 to higher. I'm just saying, for the purpose of discussion, I'm just wondering if that percentage at 5 is, if you feel like it's good, or if you feel like that's going to choke. Right now, we're almost there. We've got, like, we could maybe license 2 or 3 more of these.
I think when
Is
you
that a
look
problem?
at,
I'm just saying, do you think that it's going
Are
to
you
push people to be?
Coaching me?
No, I'm just asking you. Do you think that it's going to push people to do them
I think
illegally?
that
Put some pretty good thought into that.
I think we're in a unique, I shouldn't say unique, but we're in a good position right now where Tokerville hasn't grown as much as a lot of other areas in the last 10 years. This has been an issue. I remember listening to this nightly rental thing 5 years ago when I came in, and it's definitely been a fight. If you look across the country and see all these areas that are like, oh my gosh, we are being overrun by nightly rentals. And not only that, but how many people are being displaced out of the areas that they used to live in, because there's more money and the homes are more worth more if they're
Sure.
nightly rentals and all that kind of stuff. So a concern for me, and like, especially looking at this view that we have now, is you can say, you know what, 5% is enough. The people, they're not usually coming in here, the townspeople say, oh yeah, we want more nightly rentals. They're saying, no, I want to limit it. I've got too many on my street. And I think we're in a great position to be able to say 5%, and that's all it is. And we're there now. I've seen I know it used to be 1,000 feet, and I know Heath has been through
yeah.
all of these things. I own a nightly rental. I'm in a little bit different situation because I'm on kind of a commercial property as well, but I know what that can bring into town, and I think it would be good for us not to have every other home. So I think 5% is a good number. I think kind of looking at, we are close to that now. I think we have maybe 2 or 3 more to go. We do have, a number of hookups coming into town here pretty soon, that kind of thing. With that being said, there might, the 500 feet that we have in there is limiting on how many you can
Sequentially have.
put in an area. So that would be limiting as well. The reason I say that is if Firelight comes in and you have another 3,400,
And they're not going to be doing it in Firelight. So
and
it's
they're
all
not
gonna
doing it in
come back
Firelight,
over
then we
to
have to
the
have
500
something that
feet
says
will
you
at
can't
least
just
keep that, yeah.
overload our area.
Well, and I'm just asking the question because I think to say, oh, people aren't coming in and saying that they want nightly rentals, I don't think that's accurate. We put a moratorium in place because we had so many residents coming in. We had 4 in 1 week. So I think
No,
it's actually the
I'm not saying
opposite.
applicants.
They came,
They knew that. we
the
were
residents
talking
are
about
coming
these
in
things.
saying, I want nightly rentals. We're having a lot of that. That's why we
have
put a
a-
moratorium in place while we're doing this to say, whoa, we got to get a handle on this.
They're
So
wanting them because they
you-
want them.
Right. And
They're
so
not the majority.
But
that
the
don't
people
want
that
them.
are here in opposition are the ones I'm talking about, not the ones that know that we were gonna, hey, we're talking about limiting this, and so come in real quick and get these done. One of the upticks that I've seen just been in planning commission is people who, and we're getting rid of that ordinance that says you must be a resident, coming in and, hey, we can buy these cheap homes. So to me, I think it's a great time for us to say, no, 5%. One thought that I just did have, and maybe I didn't think it out clearly here, and that is that when we do bring in 3,400 more ERUs, that's going to really increase that number
it
of
is.
permits available. So,
But if they take them all.
well, no. So if you add 3,400 more and we say 5% of that, then we can
Oh,
have a
Right,
huge
with the
amount.
500
So
feet,
maybe it
we'll
is
minimize
in properties not designated as MPDO or something along those
Yeah,
lines is what
yeah.
we've got to.
It's a good point.
yeah, because this is what could, yeah, exactly what you're saying.
Totally
If they
flies.
put in, if Firelight comes out west and Firelight puts in even 1,000 homes, right? If they have 1,000 connections, your 5% just went through the roof.
Right.
Firelight already told you they're not doing single
Yeah.
family, these onesie twosies. So guess where they're going? That 5% is going downtown.
That's why I'm trying to figure out. So
You should be able to subtract that because that MPDO is getting theirs. So you should be able to subtract that from affecting.
That's right.
Total.
Yeah.
Because they're substituting their numbers for commercial. But to your idea of promoting illegal ones, people have been able to get a permit until the moratorium, and there wasn't when we'd gotten rid of the distance. So as many have wanted to could have.
Well, what
and
was
there's still
was the resident requirement though? We were
Correct.
turning down tons of people based on that residency requirement.
But I'll bet there's just as many illegal ones now as there is legal ones, and it's people that are living there.
Agreed.
So the ones that are gonna do it illegal are gonna do it.
I think
And
we-
the one,
I think
the-
you've
the
got
res-
it.
I'd agree we have an enforcement issue of nightly rentals.
for sure.
I
I
would
have
agree
one
with-
down the street from where I live. and-
Completely.
Actually, every city in America. has
Yeah,
that
I would
problem.
agree. Exactly.
So my question, so I was reading the other day where Salt Lake County just created an ordinance where residents can build a separate living quarters in their backyard
Free
for
dwellings, right?
long-term rental, but they say that you have to be a resident to be able to do that. Yet we're saying that that's not a legal ordinance. that-
Well, but that's a little bit different because what it is they are essentially allowing a modification of a single family zone to becoming a multifamily zone in that situation, where they basically by zoning allowing 2 dwellings to exist on one lot. That's where the difference is. And what we're talking about is this is kind of like a short-term rental. It's a permit process. And we're saying in order for you to get one of our city permits, you got to be one of our residents. And that requiring residency on that will not pass muster under the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution.
So we need to figure out a way to limit that from just or not ERUs, but culinary connections, new culinary connections to.
Culinary connections, not including connections in MPDO zones.
So that would be your
That's-
condition in the
yes,
motion.
That,
Yeah.
that way you're not
There you
getting
go.
However-
all of those new nightly rentals harvested into the downtown
Yes.
area.
However, now you're tying any other MPDOs to what Firelight is doing, and maybe the next development. I mean,
That's why it would make
We
sense.
both, we both,
The MPDOs.
you're right.
I just don't want to tie everybody's
It's a
development
great, it's a great point. It's a
to,
great
because
point.
there's a lot of undeveloped land.
It's a great
Correct.
point. Great point.
Agreed.
Good point.
Hmm.
So I don't know what the answer is to that, but figure it out, Riker.
Yeah, come up with something awesome, make us,
Making a recommendation because council is expecting to see this. The moratorium's almost over.
yeah.
You guys have had it for 4 months.
Is this
Let's take
under-
5 then. I thought we were done with that.
The ordinance, a moratorium, yeah,
I
exactly.
thought we were done with this.
I thought we are
Well,
too. I thought that
we-
any changes were
I
gonna be
thought
in
we
the
would be
motion.
too until I just thought about that ERU or the culinary connection thing coming up. And if there's 3,400 more and we're basing our number of permits off of culinary connections, our permits are going to be up to 300, 400 permits. All because Firelight's not going to permit them in their area. It's all going to be right here in this area. And now it can't because there's 1,000 or, the 500 feet limits, but still,
We
that's a
better
lot
switch
of
it. We still
permits.
got time.
We could be very specific in a city ordinance to refer to Firelight Development, MPDO. It's not ideal. It's not ideal. It's not binding Lowe's or Litchfields or anybody else who has the capability of doing MPDO.
Yeah, because council's waiting, the council is expecting this to come to them through a motion.
Yeah, so.
So
we're
if
gonna-
you need to hash it out for however long you need to hash it out, let's hash it out.
And you could make in your
They don't need it
motion
this, they
changes.
don't need it this next meeting.
Yeah, they do.
No, they don't.
You can only have a moratorium in place for 6 months,
I
so
know,
they
but You're
do.
only at 4 months. I
Mhm.
want it right and no mistakes in it, so we don't, that's a good catch. I don't want to rush anything because the city council wants it now. We have another month to make sure that that's right, because we thought we had it right and it came back for us right now and it's not right. The same thing can happen. Whenever you modify and change things, Heath can figure out something wrong with it or we can. So it needs to be perfect.
Well,
Needs to
and
be a
I think
perfect
therein
document.
lies the problem, Wayne. I don't know if
Or
I,
you
I
get it.
I've
Close
been doing
to
this for
perfect.
22 years. And I don't know if I've ever found a perfect.
You can get it
ordinance.
close, though, okay?
Close.
Obviously, we're off and could have made a grave mistake right here because we're being rushed. And I don't want to be rushed.
I'm not trying to rush you, Wayne, but what
We're
I'm
gonna
trying
make
to
the
say-
window. We're gonna make that window. but
What
we-
I'm, no,
we'll
I'm
blow it
actually
again.
not, but thanks.
We're gonna
What
make
I'm
it.
telling you is, council would also like the opportunity to review this ordinance prior to the moratorium expiring. If you hold this one more month, council's forced to make a decision on the first time this comes to council.
They're gonna change it anyway.
Maybe, we don't know. That they're the land use authority of the city. They can do what they want. But what I'm saying
But we don't want to
is,
hand them a sloppy
it's
document.
not- we had 6 months and we've given planning commission 4 months of
We
that.
gotta come up with that
So,
language.
That's all I'm
I think
saying.
it's only been 3.
Well,
So what changes do we have so far in this then?
All the
That would have been a
stuff
big mistake to make that.
everything that you got out
Everything
on
that you're
that.
seeing.
I mean, as
So-
far as
Red-
tonight saying,
Yeah, the
Make
only
this
thing
change.
the only change to this from this tonight is that discussion about
Residential connections.
residential connections and also the number of culinary connections going up.
And let's think this one through here, Stacy, because if we say residential connections, not including MPDO, then you're saying any future MPDOs other than Firelight it wouldn't increase enough to allow people to do it in their development. Is that what you're saying? Because if we said, and if we're trying to not have it all transfer into the downtown area of Tokerville, then excluding all MPDOs kind of keeps us around without any growth, 35 to 38.
but if Litchfields want to, where they have an MPDO or Lowe's, and that they want to allow
Within
nightly
their,
rentals within theirs, and they don't plan on doing a commercial nightly rental. And I don't know,
Yeah.
but we're tying their hands just because Firelight wants it.
Yeah, yep. Thinking through that one, you're right.
So there's got to be some mechanism there so that you're
Well,
not tying everybody else's
what
hands.
if you were to say, and so we have those permits that are out there now, those are grandfathered in as, well, I don't know if this would be just a thought, I'm going to throw it out there. So if I were to say 2% of culinary connections can be this, that might be a number that we would be able to live with, even with another MPDO coming in and having, I don't know, within Tokerville, you might have 100 of them versus, I don't know. Does that make sense? Did I make sense to anybody when I said that?
It makes sense.
That doesn't even make sense in my brain. So, but I'm saying if you were to lower that number to something that we might be comfortable with, if we were to have a full build out.
But it might be 20 years before another
Yeah, it
development
might be.
builds, and now we've limited downtown
Yeah.
too.
To just the private owner's building is what it would be, which,
So how do you resolve that? The Great Wives one.
You got me stumped too on that.
so can the recommendation be that, no, I don't know how you would even word that.
Not including any MPDO, approved MPDO who willingly prohibits it in their
Any-
development.
Any MPDOs that does commercial nightly rental is
Not
prohibited
even
for-
that, because I don't want
You're
to
right,
dictate.
because-
You could leave it in this and you could change it in the MPDO ordinance. Say that if you have an MPDO, you're not allowed to do residential.
There you go.
Just
But maybe
put
it's-
it in this ordinance.
The other ordinance.
But some MPDOs may want to do that. Just because Firelight doesn't want to do it, doesn't mean that you should tie it to everybody else.
Then you would have the option to just make it your own commercial MPDO deal when you do.
Okay,
I like that.
Yeah, just move it to.
talk
the
us through it just a little bit
Okay,
more. So we
so,
understand.
so we wouldn't have it in here. We would keep the wording just as it is, but we would go into the MPDO ordinance and say, in situations where a developer and MPDO elects to have a nightly rental development overlay in a commercial zone, they are prohibited from having nightly rentals throughout their residential areas. Okay. And so a developer has a choice. You can either allow it throughout your development, or you can allow it in a congregated area of your congregated commercial planning area.
That works.
But we need to follow through on that so that we don't have this come and
Yes,
hit us
right,
with a
right.
major spike.
So can we recommend that to the city council?
Hey, Riker has taken some fantastic notes so far.
So we need to make a recommendation to council tonight. So moved. I don't know. what I was-
If you don't have the wording in there, what are you going to recommend?
Well,
that's in
you're, all
different
you're doing
ordinance.
is recommending it as it's written. We need to go.
We have a
and-
safeguard for what we're talking
Yes.
about.
Well,
We
we
need-
could,
we
we
need
could
to go and
recommend
amend the
with
MPDO.
those changes that he said, that those changes
Yeah.
are made, right? So we can recommend this ordinance with the changes.
And you could say we recommend that we also work on simultaneous, in the immediate future
MPDO.
to modify the MPDO to give an alternative to either doing a nightly rental development overlay or allowing it throughout your development.
So moved. I make that motion.
I second.
Wondering what
So
the
do we even
rush
have
is. I just
Okay,
don't
Yeah.
understand.
is that a
Discuss
clear
it.
enough motion and a second? Okay, I have a motion and a second. I'll take a vote.
Aye.
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 Thank you for that.
And then that will be on our agenda next month.
So the agenda will be changing the MPDO ordinance. to
Not this no more, right?
Riker.
No, not
Maybe,
this.
maybe
done.
give him, maybe
MPDO.
come, Firelight's not.
Yeah, that's why I
pulling
was like,
building permits
we
anytime in the
gotta
next couple of
sort
months,
this
so
out. Let's just stay here till we
Yeah.
figure this out.
I would, well, I'm sorry.
No, I said, that's why I was like, let's just stay here till we figure it
We
out.
figured it out. We made a motion.
It's great.
Yeah, we figured it out and it's, now we know what we're gonna.
But Riker's got a lot
working
on his plate, but I would say within the next month or two before the
Well, not
Firelight
necessarily
pulls
next
any
month,
building
but
permits
yeah.
and there's no
Yeah,
new water
it'll be on
connections.
our priority list for sure. Okay. I should have anyway.
can't
Okay,
make it-
business
we can't
item
vote on motion.
F7. Discussion and possible recommendation on ordinance 2023, general plan applicability. Riker.
Okay, this item is before you due to inconsistencies between the consistency policy and the purpose of the current general plan applicability code. And taking into account section 10-9A-406 of Utah State Code. And we have presented a revised version of the consistency policy that is restated as the general plan utilization policy. And we have legal here to advise on that.
The policy language itself did not come from me. I know that staff looked at other municipalities, and I will tell you, state code requires every municipality to have a general plan. State code also requires the municipality to adopt its own ordinance, how it will apply the plan. We currently have a strict compliance requirement. However, I would tell you to look at things like, look at the future land use map in our general plan. It is more of a bubble type. It's not drawn on parcel boundaries or anything like that. And if you look, most general plans are written generally with concepts. And so my question has always been, I don't know how we got to the point that we have, but when staff asked me my thoughts on it, I said, with our current general plan, I don't know with the generality of what it is, how can we strict comply with it? How can we say this parcel is under the, look at the very end of you have your future land use map. Or is it page 9?
That's a fire hydrant.
It's a colored map right there. That to me shows the epitome of the generalness of this plan. All I would say is, let's look at this. We have to balance our roles as planning commission and council with people's property rights too. And you look at that and you say, okay, if I'm a property owner here, is my property in this? And does that mean I can never ask for a rezone, or any rezone is automatically going to be denied under a theory of strict compliance? And I think what you'll find is that most municipalities have, and this one I think, Riker, did it come from Springdale?
Yes.
It was about as strict as they come in their ordinances. They have a general applicability provision. So it's not strict compliance. There's a difference. It applies. We need to look at it. We should not disregard it. And it can be a basis for denial, but it's not a strict compliance type concept. So as I looked at it, and Riker put it in front of me, I looked at it and I said, I think this is more in line with what most municipalities do. Frankly, I've been doing this 22 years and I haven't seen any municipality in Washington County that has a strict compliance requirement like what we have.
Perfect. You want me to show you all the ones that do? Oh, this, I've done a lot of research on this, and you hit the nail right on the head. Property rights. It's about property rights and protecting the people. So in my opinion, for some reason, I think everybody is viewing this as a, you can't do it type policy. It simply makes the council, before they make a zone change or change somebody's zone that affects everybody else, it makes them look at it and it makes them hold a public hearing at the council, not at the planning commission. That's what this is telling you to do, and it's not that hard.
To amend the general plan.
To amend
To
the
amend the
general
general plan,
to allow-
because you
Okay.
have to, because the consistency policy
Yeah.
says, okay, look, you can't just willy-nilly just change it without reviewing it.
Washington
I see.
cities would be about as close to what
Can
you're
I,
describing.
let me interrupt this, sir. We do have to have a public hearing on this tonight. So I would like to just get general
Well, We
information
can't have a
out.
public hearing.
Huh?
It wasn't posted. Correct. This
It
one
shows-
wasn't posted
Was
on
it
March
not posted?
29th.
No, there was no posting.
If
for
it
this.
wasn't posted, we don't, but it
It's
says
in
on
the-
my
it's in
agenda
this,
that
but-
we do. Was it posted or not?
According to the one on the 29th, it's not showing this one as a public hearing. I hope I'm right.
I've been wrong on that one
I'm
twice.
looking on
Though.
the,
Riker's got me twice on that one.
They don't get them up there.
okay, so I'm looking at Tokerville. Let me get to,
Somebody's
And
right.
just to be clear on that, you can still hold a public hearing, but you would have to hold another one. Do you see what I'm saying? To meet the
Right,
compliance
yeah.
of the state. So if people are here and want to speak, they could speak on it. If you as the chairman say that, we could hear from them. We would just have to hold an additional one to meet the state.
So I would like, is there any other questions from council or commission for staff so everybody can hear what we have questioning? Not necessarily specific, but I think we've kind of nailed that down. So did you see that it was posted?
I'm looking at it right now.
Okay. So I do think that we'll do that because I think we might have a couple people here for that. So
Hold on. I'm looking, the attachment is here for today's date. 2023 general plan utilization policy.
Just 1 second, Chairman. Will you pull up the last planning commission meeting? Riker's wondering if we already had the public hearing at that one. And then if it was tabled for more information. He's thinking that there was a public hearing at the last one and then that it was tabled for more information. So let's just pull that up. And then will you pull the meeting? Yeah, pull the actual.
Public hearing, you're saying there's no notice of public hearing,
Right.
not.
So
okay,
pull
let me
this. So
look.
we've got, so keep going. That was the MU.
I'm
Go
looking
back
at the
up.
wrong document. Yep.
It might have been on the one before that.
I've got table, Riker's working on it.
Mhm.
and that's what we would have done, but we may have had a public hearing.
Yeah, double check and make sure, because if it's already had a public hearing, then it met the code. Possible recommendation, there was a
Number
public
6A
hearing.
shows
Number
that it's
6A is a
hearing,
public.
so.
So the public hearing's already been completed, but you can still hear from them because
Yeah,
they're here.
I do want to do that. So I will
So-
open. I'm
So
sorry.
Stacy, you are both correct and we're still good to go. So the public's in luck.
Okay, so I will open this up for a public hearing. Public input is sought on ordinance 2023 amending Title 7 or Title 10, Chapter 7, Section 2, updating the consistency policy. If anybody from the public would like to address us, you can go ahead and do that now. No? Okay, then I will take a motion to close the public hearing on that.
Make a motion to close public hearing.
Second.
Have a motion and a second? Take a vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Okay, now back into the heavy discussion. You know, when I looked through this and I know that there's this idea that there's a inconsistency. I actually, when I look at it and I look at what the intent, I believe, is of the previous councils, I don't see any inconsistency in the language. To me, it sounds like it says that if you have a zone or a zone change that you're looking for and it doesn't fit the general plan, then the step that you have to do is amend the general plan, and it says that. That's one step that you'd have to go through to get a zoning that you needed over just it being approved in a zone. I did look at the 406, the 10-9A 406. In the language it says, after the legislative body has adopted a general plan, no street, park, or other public way, ground, place, or space, no publicity or publicly owned building or structure, and no public utility, whether publicly or privately owned, may be constructed or authorized until and unless it conforms to the general plan.
That's public.
Now, and I get it, and I'm going to make a
Public,
comment to that.
okay.
Ours says one other, and that is zone changes. It's in there. And then it says, and so that was I believe, and you, I don't know if you were here writing that consistency policy or not, but that kind of, when you add that into, and if you look at the state code, it says this, but they chose to use zoning changes as well. Then if you look at Utah Code 109A 405, 109A 405 says this is the effect of the general plan. So this is telling us that we can make it you have to or you don't or however, right?
Yeah.
And it says except as provided in section 109A 406, which is the public uses, which we have to. The general plan is an advisory guide for land use decisions, the impact of which shall be determined by ordinance. So previous city councils, in my opinion, looked at it, said, okay, we have this public, but we really want it to be a little stiffer than that, which we already heard is pretty tough. They added zone. And then even further in the ordinances that talk about zoning, it says must meet the requirements of the general plan. So that was to me, it was a very deliberate thing. It wasn't, hey, we said something and we just kind of, to me, it is consistent with what I think they tried to do in the past with that code.
Can I agree with you to some extent, but is there a possibility you could pull up, just Google Washington City General Plan? And I just want to show the Planning Commission the difference in how they do it. They break their city up into areas like Green Springs and Washington Fields. So click on that blue link right there. And start scrolling down, and I'll tell you, keep going. You're going to get into where you're going to see maps. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Well, and you notice that's their land. Okay, keep going.
You're making me dizzy.
Okay, right. Let's use this right here. That is the Coral Canyon area map. Okay. Do you see how specific that is to parcels?
Mm-hmm.
And the detail and level of it? And they say, okay, that is not our map right there. And they say, you have to, if you want to do something zoning wise different than that, you have to amend the general plan. But we need to get that specific in order for us to do
I
that.
don't disagree with
And
that.
our general plan, frankly, is just so not written that way. And so I struggle with the consistency between the vagueness of our general plan and a strict consistency requirement on zone changes. So either we need to get rid of the strict consistency right now, or we need to amend our general plan ASAP. In my
So
mind.
in 406, where it says the legislative body adopt the general plan, no streets, parks, blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
And then at the end, it says whether publicly or privately owned.
Utilities.
No, it's
Yeah.
all one sentence. Comma, there's no period.
It's referring to utilities.
What are you on? 10, you're in 10?
10-9A 406.
It says, and no public utility, comma, whether publicly or
public-
privately owned.
It's
So I think
it's
referring to
modifying
that.
utility.
I believe that.
It's modifying.
But it's
utility.
modifying streets, parks, and other public ways too then, because it's all one sentence.
Okay, private parks. I would, okay.
They're either publicly or private. So I'm just trying to figure out if we go with, okay, we don't really have to follow the general plan, but you know, we change a zone because of it. And then somebody can't come in and build a street because it has to fit the general plan, and they have to modify the general plan to fit, to build the street. Because it's all going to be public streets generally.
Yeah, but I think you're missing emphasis. To me, you're blending infrastructure with uses. And I think they're a little bit different. You're talking about roads and utilities versus, and those need to be in the areas we've identified. If our general plan has a master road plan, it needs to be
Correct.
Where we identify. But the uses and those types of things, I don't know. And I keep coming back to the section in general plan where it says, let me get 405 effective
405.
general plan. General plan is an advisory guide for land use decisions,
Right,
the impact of which shall be determined by ordinance.
right.
That to me seems like a pretty clear guidance from our legislature, what they think general plans should be. yet we have it differently. And I'm not saying that it's wrong or right. I'm just saying we need to look at, we either need to get a much more specific general plan and require consistency or amendment to it, or we need to drop the strict compliance.
I really, like Wayne was saying, I really think that this, that people move here for what Tokerville is. And I think a lot of it has to do with that strict compliance to the general plan.
Then we need to get a
And
more
and
specific
when we
general
take
plan.
that away, to me, we are taking away the voice of the people who have put all their input in.
And I totally agree with both of
I
you
wonder if
guys.
maybe some of the language in there, if you look at the consistency policy real quick, Days, just the one that you had back up, please. I'm wondering if maybe in something here, it needs to have some sort of reference. So this is what's happening. People are looking at our general plan. They're moving to Tokerville. They're looking at our general plan. They're looking at that map and they're coming in the city and saying, I didn't realize this was going to be here. I didn't realize this was going to be here. I wonder if there needs to be something, at least at a minimum, that references our current zoning map. That
Yeah,
map
and I
is,
think
if Daisy, pull up that bubble map right there that's in our current, this is our current general plan. Now please pull up the zoning map that was just done by, so if you were buying property based on that, if you're moving to Tokerville and you're buying property based on this map, thinking this is what exists in Tokerville, will you please pull that up and pull up our current zoning map with all of the other colors and things? Those are considerably different maps. Right? And this is what's happening. People are saying, I did my due diligence. They're saying, I've looked at your general plan. That we've had them come into the city. They've come in here a million times. We've heard them at city council. And they're saying, we're looking at your general plan. And so maybe even just at somewhere in this, it needs to reference even, I understand, like even if the consistency policy stays, somehow, some way, outside of the land use decisions being made based on the general plan, we at least need to modify something, somehow, some way. We need to let people understand and know that regardless of what the general plan that is currently in place, that map is not accurate. This is our current zoning map as of now.
I like the idea.
And so
of-
that's the disconnect.
All I
agree.
want us to do is,
Not accurate. This
Wayne,
is
I want
accurate.
us to
That's
have
different than
a
this.
much more detailed
That's old.
general
That's-
plan,
That's what
and I want us to keep.
I
That's
just,
what
I really believe you're all missing the point here.
What's the point?
It's a simple procedure. We're not saying, this consistency plan says, no, you can't have that. If that's zoned R120 and I wanted to buy it, I come in and I want to change it. I come in, they look at it, and they say, oh, okay, we've got to have a public hearing on this particular item. And then they can do whatever they want. It's not stopping the town council for granting anything. It's just a stopgap to say, whoa, stop. Okay, let's get the people involved and have the public input. And it's telling you right here. It's just simple. The general plan may be amended by the city council by the following same procedures.
Yeah.
And you have to hold the public hearing
No.
city council
Wayne,
level.
Wayne, I completely agree. Zone
So
changes.
what's the hang up with
that-
this thing?
So I'll just,
It doesn't stop anybody
So
from doing
we-
anything.
Right now, we're talking about not changing the way the general plan consistency says. What we're talking about is changing the mapping and that map that. is
Yeah,
on there
that would be
that's-
way much better.
That's what we're talking about. So they would still have to go through the general plan amendment to do a zone change in an area that wasn't identified as that zone in the general plan.
I understand that. I do
So-
not want to take away the public's
Right. I agree.
input, chance to view
Do that.
that zone change. I do not want to take that away. And it requires a public hearing at city council.
That's right.
And
That's
it's
what
not
we're-
that tough.
But it also, a zone change requires a public
zone
hearing
change, yeah.
at the planning commission.
Yeah, but we are
So you
only
want two-
advisory board.
So you want two,
Which means a zone
requires-
change
It
amendment. and
requires
then
it
a
right
zone
here.
change.
Yeah.
Right.
It
a
says it
general
right
plan
in here.
amendment, and then
It's
a
a,
zone
it's a
change.
two public hearing process.
All the criteria that follow
No zone.
Right,
to make
And-
that.
and
which
that
those
gives-
should be changed a bit.
Zone change.
Yeah, so if they can change whatever they want, but it's, to me, it's just, it's giving the public, the people that voted them in, a chance to view their opinion again, because that's how it was created. The general plan was created by the public, basically by the input. But we take that away from them without this policy. So they're going to get the policy, and the general plan can stay is merely guidelines for whatever, but they have to check
So
that box
what
before they
we're
go on.
looking at right now, or what's in discussion is that we're not going to change the general plan applicability clause. None of this gets changed, the stuff that we've been talking about. Just changing the map, that's such a generalized map that you can't look at it and say, what zoning is that in? Or am I in that zoning? So we're actually making the general plan stronger by saying this is actually.
Does that
zoned as
help
is.
the consistency thing with doing that?
Well, it says that Tokerville's adopted an idea that the general plan should be adhered to. or it
And I
should be-
might suggest the general plan go into more detail by areas, because we have different areas in Tokerville.
Oh, yes.
Like you imagine Westfields or something like that versus other areas. And that's what like Washington City did. They broke up their city into different areas because there are different standards that you want. You want it in the Washington Fields, you want more of a rural agricultural look, even though it's quickly becoming rooftops and stuff like that. And so I just think we need to have more specificity.
And just one more clarification. The intent with the consistency policy, just to speak to what Wayne was saying, you couldn't take away the right for the public to speak if you wanted to. The state does not allow that. That is an absolute, if a public hearing is required, it's required. It has to be held. What this is saying is, in ours, it says that a zone change must conform with the general plan. What we're saying is the map in the general plan is not accurate.
Well, fix
So
that, not
that's what
this.
we're saying.
That's what
So
we're
that's
saying.
what we're saying.
What we're
So what we're
saying.
asking is to take the map that is in the general plan and reference our current zoning map. That's the discussion that we're having. So all the public hearings, all of that. But so here's what happens. Let's say if you lived in Tokerville, our general plan was put into place 5 years ago, right? So if you lived in Tokerville during that time, you had the option to come to the public hearings. You had the option to weigh in on a survey. You got to do all these things. You could go participate in the open houses, all of these things, right? And that's the feedback that we got, was from the residents that were here 5 years ago. Now, understanding that some of those people have moved away, right? They don't even live here anymore. Maybe they passed away, maybe they moved away. But new people have also moved in. Right. And so in order to give new people who have moved in also a voice, also a say in what happens,
We just
going
did.
by that strict, right. So
Just did
going,
5 months ago.
we did, and we're currently redoing our general plan. But what I'm saying is, so our general plan from 5 years ago is currently in effect. So new people who move in need to be able to do a couple of things. And one is participate in the public process. Whether it's coming here, it's speaking at the microphone, it's participating in a public hearing. That's their right. If a public hearing is required, they have to have the ability to do that. The other thing is, people who are moving in need to be able to know what our zoning is, outside of just looking at an old, outdated map. That's why we've paid a considerable amount of money to Sunrise Engineering to get a new map. So what we're asking is the consistency policy will remain, but on there where it says must be in conformance with the general plan, we need to some way, somehow get to the point where it says that it's consistent with the most updated map.
Yes.
People have received zone changes over the last 5 years. They're not reflected in that map in the general plan. That's what we're asking, is to make that consistent, that the actual general plan and what they're going to look at and what new people moving in are going to see, they're still going to be able to speak at a public hearing, but they need to be able to see the most updated
So
information.
just put in parentheses, see the most.
Something,
Yeah.
but you've got to amend this some way,
Current.
somehow.
Yeah, and I actually like what he was saying about the areas and then having it be more concise and where things are and that kind of thing. So that
Something.
makes sense. And I think we're in a great spot before big, huge growth comes in to do that. But the difference between changing the consistency plan to one just saying it's a guideline, to me, is that one extra step, that if you wanted to do something that is in the general plan that shows it as a certain zoning, that you would have to amend that part. And that's another meeting that's coming in and say, hey, we have to amend that general plan to do that. You give the people the ability to speak on it. So that, to me, is important that we maintain that. So how do we say that in a, well, we're not making a recommendation tonight. We're giving you direction in what we're looking for in this in the general plan consistency. So what I'm hearing is that we're maintaining the same verbiage of our current one. However, we need to add in there that we are modifying the map in the current general plan to be more concise in identifying those zones.
Yeah,
Is that-
but Chairman, this is a discussion and possible recommendation, so you do need a motion. So you would make a motion to table.
That's, yeah.
You would need to call for a motion.
Okay, thank
So
you.
do we change in, Heath,
Mhm.
in this consistency policy, can we put in there must be in conformance with the general plan, see most current?
I think that would be,
Most current
So
zone.
we ain't changing that.
No,
well-
no, we're going, so if we table it now with the recommendations of adding these things in, the next time it comes before us, hopefully that stuff is, and then we can make a recommendation again to council or table it or whatever we got to do to make it right.
I guess I want to make myself perfectly clear. I want that to come before the city council with the public, like our code says. And right now, we get all the public input and the council doesn't hear it. That's why land changes are a big deal to people and they don't have the opportunity to go to city council and have a public hearing. And it says
Yeah,
right
they
there,
do.
you should have been doing public
City
hearings,
council
but you
have
never
public hearing
have.
for zone
And
change.
that's, we're cutting the public out. I don't want that to go away. I think that's a
Oh.
really important
What,
stopgap.
so
in
what
our-
Wayne is asking is for something separate. What he's asking is for an additional public hearing at the council level.
It's-
He
it's
would
not
like that
additional,
included
it's
in that.
Your book right here, right now. Read it.
Our
What-
current code only
what-
requires a planning
It's
commission.
City council review all public notices, consistent with section, the city council shall hold a public hearing for the amendment of that. It says right.
Amendment of a
That's for
general
the amendment of the
plan.
general plan, not a
Get
zone
away from
change.
The general plan.
And
'cause
that, and that would be what would happen. So if they go to do a general plan amendment,
Right.
then they would have to take it in front of the city council.
Correct,
For a public hearing.
correct.
Yeah.
So we're not changing that.
so-
What we're looking is just
yeah.
making sure that we're keeping this, just identifying those areas
Okay.
better so you know what zone you're actually in.
Because I'm a Joe Public and I don't want to come to a
No,
public meeting
I-
in the planning commission because we're an advisory board. I want to go right in front of the city council and plead my case with
Okay.
5 or 6 other of my relatives.
So the
Understood.
motion,
Whatever,
the
friends,
motion would be
you know?
to, the motion.
So,
might-
so they're
Yeah.
heard, so the council's
the
heard.
motion might be-
Yeah, a general plan requires one at the planning commission and public and city council level.
motion would be to table and have staff make
a zone.
a second revision, basically keeping our current consistency plan, but to include that it has to be referenced to the current general plan. And then we need to get working on our general plan.
Which we're in the,
So-
we're
so
in the
it's not
middle of
going-
it
so
anyways.
would
It's
that-
already,
That
yeah.
wouldn't put it, is it already noticed?
The general plan will be in front of planning commission within 2 months.
Okay, great.
So it's not just the current general plan, it's maps.
Correct.
Maps.
Yeah, yep. It's the the general plan. We're working on the annexation policy plan. It's all of them.
Do you know
Yeah.
the plan, or do they have a map, part of our new general plan? Are they working on that?
The ones that did our zoning map that we just showed you.
Right, and so are they already working on giving us a better map than what we have? That's what. I'm
Our
asking.
current one, the one days where you just pull up our current zoning, this is interactive. This
Zoning
one is
map.
brand new and this is the interactive one.
So
And
the-
this is what they're working
And
on.
so the other part of that would be, can we add into it those specific areas that Heath had talked about of like this area and this is the.
Just blow it up
to
of
blow
what's
it
already
up
there.
And have.
You can
right,
zoom in
so-
on this one. Ours is interactive, so you can zoom
well,
in.
yeah, that's-
You can click on something, so you can identify it by
But
area,
if-
or
but if-
you could
well,
click on it.
My reasoning for saying that is if we were to specify in our new general plan that it doesn't exactly meet what our current zoning is, I don't know if that's.
This map will change as zone changes
right, I
go.
understand that.
They'll do updates. So this map, now that it's interactive, this map will actually update. So when our general plan references our current zoning map, this is what it will, because this will change as people come in and get a zone change, it will update. It'll be live. It's interactive. It's live and it's interactive and it works with the county.
Well, okay, but my question is, this interactive, this is our current, as we sit right now, our zoning map. What happens if someone wants to make a zone change into a zone that we want to promote from a planning standpoint?
That's where I was.
Yeah,
you have to have a stagnant future land use map, but it has to be more specific than current, because if I was in the green and I wanted to change to the blue, but the future land use map showed it as blue already, then I don't have to go get a general plan amendment. But if I was trying to change, but if the future land use plan showed it as green, I would have to get a general plan amendment and then get a zone change.
So kind of like down that same road, if the city said, hey, you know what, we really need to have this type of use out in Anderson Junction, different than what we are, we could say that in a general plan that future use, we want that this. We could have it actually show those lots identified as that, but it's not currently that.
We do need to have
Yeah,
a
you can
stagnant
we
future
can
land
have
use map.
Yeah, we can have a standing bubble. one.
Right, and that's what I'm getting at, but it also needs to be more specific as to what properties are affected by that standing zone, so people can look at it and say, oh yeah, I'm outside of that they said that these lots should be in that. And then if they come in for a zone change in that, then they have to do an amendment to that general plan. That makes
So there's a
more
way
sense.
of promoting the planning that the city sees for the future.
Absolutely.
If it's already planned that way for the future, it doesn't have to get a general plan amendment. But if it's not, then you're going to have to come, you're going to have to show it, you're
It's-
going to have to allow the
It's another
public to
meeting.
give their 2 bits and
Right, yeah.
before you even get to the zone
So
change.
how did you make that motion or that recommendation on the motion there?
I moved that we tabled I don't move. I don't make
No,
any
you didn't
motions.
move.
I would suggest that Stacy would move to table this matter, and that we instruct staff to amend the ordinance to keep the basic body of our consistency policy, but include a reference to the current general plan as amended. Or the general plan and zoning map as amended.
Yes, so moved.
I got a motion.
I
Do I have a
second.
second? I have a motion and a second. Take a vote.
Okay,
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Oops, which one am I writing on here? Okay, now we're at,
Leaving so soon?
what time are we at anyways? Or how far are we getting here? Oh, man, it's before 9. Let's keep going.
Go down to where? 8.
Okay, so now we're at 8, correct? Okay, item F8, discussion and possible recommendation on ordinance 2023 consolidation of contiguous lots and parcels. Staff, have you got anything for us?
Yes, so this item before you, it's the same ordinance that was presented to you at the last planning commission meeting with a few minor red lines. Prior to that, myself and Darren spoke with Commissioner Eaton about this ordinance, and we were able to go through this and come to a consensus there. And as far as the minor red lines that are there, they include mostly regards to engineering language to be more industry specific. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that, Darren.
Well, we spoke with Heath as well, and he thought that the changes that we had implemented there were pretty consistent with what needed. They were very, very minor. They're just changing words. Yeah. So,
I especially liked the suggested change that it be considered a partial plat amendment.
yes.
There's a difference between
Full on.
amending an entire plat would require, if all the lots are sold, it would require every property owner to sign off, or you'd have to do the public noticing and everything like that. When it's a partial plat amendment, and it's not affecting any other lots besides the one person, so you could have, if one person owned 2 lots and they contiguous lots and they wanted to merge them, then it would be a partial plat amendment. Only they're doing it, only they have to, it doesn't require any other consent or anything like that. And it seems like the way to do it, and that's recommended for platted subdivisions, for meets and bounds parcels.
And just so you know, the county recorder requires it that way. If you change the outside boundary, they require the entire map to be
Yeah, 'cause you're changing the subdivision.
changing the
Yeah,
subdivision
footprint-
boundary.
The footprint.
So that has to go through a public hearing. Most people, you have to either notify everyone that owns a lot in that property or do a public hearing. And that's, so that's just a little different process than what we have here. That's not what we're trying. And I liked what Heath had written about the parcel, bringing in parcels. So it kind of goes above and beyond what we had talked about. Just a recorded lots in a subdivision. So that we have a process to follow. And when somebody joins two parcels, not in a subdivision. So
So the goal was to try to simplify as much as we possibly can, combining two lots. Because right now you have to amend a subdivision and it's a big deal. And there's just no simple way to do it. And we've butted heads, we've gone around and around. And I do think that this ordinance is as simple as it can get. I was hoping it would be even more so, but with the requirements that the recorder's office requires for recordings, this is as good as it's going to get. It doesn't have to come in front of the planning commission if you're just combining two lots or two parcels. It's just staff reviewed. JUC takes a look at it, and I think this is as good of an ordinance as we're going to get in combining two lots.
and I just appreciate Commissioner Eaton. I really appreciate you going through this process with me and helping me try to, because I was very much open-minded, trying to figure out a way to accommodate what you were doing, but I just knew the process.
I think it was a good process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, we had a public hearing on this one last meeting, so there's no need for that. So any need for further discussion right now? You guys want to? Okay. Then I'll be looking for a motion.
I make a motion that we approve ordinance.
And for approval.
Recommend. Yeah.
Recommend approval. Thank you. Business item F8. Ordinance.
You want me to make that motion for you?
Sure, go for it.
You're not conflicted?
Go for it.
What do you want it to say?
Definitely.
Let me get on this here.
Just recommend approval.
So we're going to recommend approval
Yes.
What do you mean?
of business item
F8.
F8. That's simple. For consolidation of continuous lots and parcels.
Recommendation to council.
Recommendation to
Yeah,
council.
motion and second. Any need to further discuss this? Yeah, I'll take it.
Aye.
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 Okay. Anything
We
else we
got
need to
one done.
discuss tonight?
We got one done.
Okay. Anything else
not
needed to
even 10
discuss
o'clock.
tonight?
So the only
Then
thing
I
I
will-
could say is if we can get the stuff earlier than the night before,
Absolutely.
it helps us.
Especially
There was way too much to go through.
Jay-Z's gonna go back to doing your packets. You'll get it.
I got my stuff at 3:30 yesterday.
Yeah, so we get, ideally it would be Thursday because you're gone on Friday. There was so much to go through on this that it was an all-nighter almost thing going
Yeah,
through.
that's
it
a
all.
3-hour night out.
Yeah,
There's too
Um,
much on there.
so
There's too
I
much on
will,
there for us.
I'll take a motion to adjourn. Whoops, Heath, did you have something? Nope.
I make a motion that we adjourn this meeting.
Okay, I have a motion.
Second that.
You got a second?
We got
We'll
2
take a
seconds.
vote.
Aye.
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 Okay, meeting's adjourned at 8:51.
And good job.
That was a short
Done
one.
tonight.
Good job.